I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justus Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is Boogie Nights the greatest movie ever made?
My fucking wife has an ass in her cock in the driveway, Kurt.
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made. A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world. You know, I noticed that you started making noises in the middle of my thing, so yes. I did pause there to allow for it. I was not expecting that at all to exit your mouth.
Last week I said yeehaw, and I was like, maybe I should just make it something related to the movie. It's a new thing I'm trying, and this movie is about fucking. So
So you made an anime girl noise?
I did a little sex moan. I did a little porno moan. We were off mic, like right before we started recording, joking about what if we did this whole episode as ASMR. So I also thought about like trying to do an ASMR thing there, but then I was like, the inspiration didn't hit. The ASMR muse didn't really speak to me. So I just went,
I am as always the chaos in the room today. As always, I am your host, David Scandura, and I'm joined by my co-host and the chest Rockwell to my Brock Landers, Justus Burkett.
That sounds about right. I definitely think that in our dynamic, I'm the John C. Reilly of the Mark Wahlberg John C. Reilly duo, because of two idiots, I'm the dumber one. Which is definitely John C. Reilly's vibe in this movie.
I also decided to be Mark Wahlberg because I don't want to accuse you of being a violent racist. So I'll just take that upon myself.
Yeah, I mean, he just did a couple hate crimes, didn't he? That's just a thing that guy did, and he just gets to be a movie star, huh?
He really did. We'll talk about Marky Mark in a second here. How are you doing, first of all?
I am doing pretty well, David. I feel unhinged currently. But in general, I've been pretty good. I have a show this weekend that I'm in, Midsummer Night's Dream, with Lark Productions out of Prescott. That's performing at Arcosanti, which if you don't know what Arcosanti is, just Google it. It's pretty cool. And that is happening this weekend. And then after that, I am not in any theater productions for the foreseeable future, which I am very excited about because I get my fucking weekends back. And I finally get to just have a Saturday and a Sunday where nobody is expecting me to show up anywhere or do anything. And that's going to be beautiful. So yeah, I'm thrilled about that. But yeah, I've been good. It's finally getting cold here in Flagstaff, Arizona, where this podcast is based, which I'm excited for because it's been like unseasonably warm, and that has like I was having like a reverse seasonal depression thing with that, where I was just like, it's too warm and it's like bugging me out, like it's making me feel like uneasy. But now it's like nice and chilly like it's supposed to be, and I'm just waiting for that first snow, because I don't know about you, David, but I love the snow, and I'm stoked to get into wintertime and see my dogs running around in our big yard when it's covered in snow. So yeah, no, doing good overall. How are you, man?
I'm good. I've had a pretty good week. Had a good week in the gym, spent some time with family. I am looking forward to the snow. It's hard because the last couple of winters I've actually realized that I kind of have seasonal depression, but I also love the winter. So I don't know how those two things go hand in hand.
It's a paradox.
We'll see how it goes this year. It's getting colder. The heat in my house is acting funky. So we'll have to talk to landlord and get him to come out and figure that out again.
Landlord, if you're listening, fix David's shit. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that your landlord knows what podcasts are.
Probably doesn't. He's rather ancient. But yeah, good week. Nice weekend so far. But what have you been enjoying in books, movies, podcasts, music?
Books. Sorry, the idea of me reading is hilarious. You lent me your copy of No Country for Old Men, and it has just been sitting in our house. I do plan to read it at some point, but listeners to this podcast, I am not a big reader. I have probably read 2 books in the last... When did I graduate college? 8 years ago? So I have read probably 2 books in the last 8 years. I read Devil in the White City and I read Dune. And those are the... Oh, I actually did read another book called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, but that barely counts because it's like novella length, and also it's formatted as like a bunch of emails back and forth, so there's just also a lot of white space on pages. So it's probably the amount of words of a short story. Anyway, but yeah, so what I have been enjoying in media, I have been listening to some old John Denver lately. I'm a huge John Denver fan, and I had forgotten that one of his first albums, one of his 1970 albums, I think he released 2 that year, which is called Take Me to Tomorrow. I forgot that it's like wall-to-wall bangers, and it's like not one of his best known records. So I have been enjoying Take Me to Tomorrow by John Denver, a 1970, what was that, like 53-year-old album? Something like that? I don't know what math is. Anyway, yes. So listen to that very old piece of music by a country legend taken before his time. Man, what a tragic story. Anyway, what have you been enjoying in media, David?
I watched Hell or High Water.
Oh, hell yeah.
I rewatched it.
Oh, Podmaster's celebrating that. She loves that movie.
It's one of those, the first time I saw it, I was like, this is good. And I watched it again, and I'm like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And I love Westerns. I love crime movies. Put them together, and I'm a happy fucking guy. So, great flick. Great flick. If you haven't seen Hell or High Water, in the vein of No Country for Old Men, kind of, it's written by Taylor Sheridan, who's involved with the Yellowstone show. He also wrote Sicario and Wind River. Great fucking movie. Jeff Bridges kills it in that movie. Jeff Bridges doing what he had been doing for a while, which was just playing Rooster Cogburn. He did that in a few movies that weren't called True Grit. And this might be his best just doing Rooster Cogburn again performance. And great performances from Ben Foster and Chris Pine as well. So,
yeah. I remember I saw that movie once, like when it came out, and I do remember being blown away by Chris Pine specifically. Is Chris Pine the best Chris?
I think he's the best Chris.
I think so, right? Because it's like, I like, I haven't seen a ton of Hemsworth outside of Marvel. I think he's all right. I'm kind of mixed to leaning negative on Pratt. And Captain America. What's that guy's last name? Evans. I think Chris Evans is good. I think he was great in Knives Out. But he's probably second to Pine for me.
Yeah, I think Evans and Hemsworth are both good, but they're kind of still in the shadow of Marvel. And I would love to see directors really take advantage of them as actors, because I think they're both good.
Yeah. They just gotta get out of those super suits and into some real fucking movies.
Yeah.
Sorry, no offense to Marvel fans who are listening to the podcast.
But Pratt had his time. He had his moment, and I think that moment has long passed for him.
Yeah, Parks and Rec era Pratt is really my favorite Pratt.
And he's really good in those Guardians movies.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the third one, but in that first one, he's good. But I remember people saying, like, oh, he should be the next Indiana Jones. He was one of those actors that, kind of like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, where every time there was a possible remake or reboot announced, everyone was like, oh, he should play Han Solo.
Right. Throw Pratt at it.
Throw Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson at it.
Yeah.
One of those, like, kind of who we're gonna, like, the actor we're gonna talk about today.
Yes.
One of those Hollywood leading men that studios just sort of threw at projects to see if they would stick.
Yes, and the common element there being they usually don't stick, and a big factor there is that like Chris Pratt and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Mark Wahlberg, who we will be talking about more in a little bit, is relatively charismatic on camera and is also not a good actor. I don't think he is good at acting. This movie is an exception to that, which we'll talk about. But yeah, I think all of those guys, it's basically like, here's a little handsome man. We can put him in front of the screen and people like to look at him. And it's like, yeah, but he also has to like do a good job of playing a character, which a lot of those guys don't consistently do.
Let's get into the movie.
Yeah.
We're talking about Boogie Nights from 1997, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Now, Justus, this was your pick.
It was.
You have often characterized me as the quote-unquote film bro of the podcast.
Yes.
I would push back on that slightly because I think there are, like a lot of film fans, there's plenty of stuff I haven't seen. And Paul Thomas Anderson is one of the film broiest of the film bro directors.
True.
And I have seen a few of his movies, and I'm kind of mixed to slightly positive on all the ones that I've seen. And they're basically because I just need to watch them again. So this was my second go around with Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
And the first time I watched it, like I said, thought it was good. Didn't have much, didn't leave a lasting impression on me that much. So you have a past relationship with this movie, so I think I should turn it over to you and to talk about your experience with this film.
I actually barely have a past experience with this movie. It's not much more than yours is. I picked this movie because I thought it would be really fun to talk about and because I wanted to watch it again. This is also my second time with this movie. I've only seen this movie twice as well. And I only saw this movie for the first time within like the last like 2 years. I was like on a work trip. I was traveling for work and I was just like in a hotel room because like the work day ends at 5 and I'm in a city that I don't live in, and you know, my wife and dogs and stuff aren't around, so I have nothing to do after work, nobody to hang out with. So I just went back to my hotel and I was like, well, I gotta kill time somehow. Boogie Nights is 2.5 hours. When else am I gonna have 2.5 hours free just on a random weeknight? I guess I'll order some food and watch Boogie Nights. And that's what I did. And I think, unlike you, and the reason that I picked this movie for this podcast, it did leave a really big impression on me the first time I watched it. I watched this movie alone in my hotel room, all the lights off, eating like takeout dumplings or whatever. And I felt like fundamentally changed at the end of it. To the point where I think, because I've talked about how like I wouldn't characterize myself as like a cinephile, right? Like I love movies, which is the literal definition of cinephile. But I don't feel like I have the film literacy and knowledge, right, to talk intelligently about them, which is why we have a stupid podcast. But this was a movie where after I finished watching it, I was like, there is so much that for both a casual film fan and also for someone who is like really, really into movie making in that movie. Like, I feel like it hooks you. It's like, it's sort of like a crowd pleasing movie in a weird way, even though, you know, it's rated R and it has a lot of graphic violence and sexual content and stuff. I still think it is kind of a crowd pleasing type of movie, right? Where I think anybody who's interested in film as an art form at any level is going to be able to tell that a lot of intention and care and artistry and craft went into the movie. And I think that was kind of one of the things that really hit me about it, where I was like, it's one of those pieces of art where anybody can approach it and appreciate how well constructed it is I think the thing for me with this movie. And it's one of the first movies that I remember having that reaction to, right? Because up until a few years ago, movies were kind of just like, oh yeah, movies, right? And I didn't have like an interest in the craft of movie making, and it wasn't like something that I was consciously thinking about when I was watching them. And I think that this is one of the first movies that kind of changed that for me, and I started kind of reevaluating other movies that I had watched and almost using Boogie Nights as like a comparison point, right? To help me understand film better in general, right? So yeah, that's kind of the reaction that I had to this movie the first time I watched it, and why I wanted to talk about it again. Also, it's a fun movie with lots of fun stuff in it.
Yeah. It's interesting you describe it that way, because I would use what you just said to describe my relationship with 2001: A Space Odyssey. First time that I saw it, where I felt like it exposed me to the craft of filmmaking in a way that movies I'd seen up to that point hadn't had that, they hadn't had that effect on me. The difference is, I think 2001 has a degree of kind of highbrow art in a lot of ways. And I think Paul Thomas Anderson as a director has that same pedigree to him now. But there's something kind of dirty and scrappy about the way Boogie Nights feels. It's part of that kind of indie renaissance that happened in the 90s, where we have these young upstart directors like Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez making films based on the films that influenced them.
Right.
And I think Boogie Nights has a lot of influences that it pulls from, while also creating something that feels new and fresh and exciting. Paul Thomas Anderson made this when he was 26. What was I doing when I was 26? Jack and shit.
Yeah. Anytime I remember that fact that he was 26 years old when he made this movie, it makes me want to die. Because I'm like, man, there are just some people in this world who are fucking geniuses, and I am not one of them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I was 26 years old, the idea of accomplishing something 1/100th as impressive as the film Boogie Nights is still was so astronomically out of reach. It's just it's unfathomable to me. It's crazy.
Yeah, this is Paul Thomas Anderson's second film, based on a short film that he made when he was, I think, 18, that was called The Story of Dirk Diggler.
Yes.
He wanted to make this originally 3 hours long, NC-17, this kind of epic graphic story of the porn industry in the 70s. But he wanted control after having some difficulty shooting his first film, Hard 8. But eventually, in talks with the studio, they brought it down to an R. He cut about half an hour from the film. Some fun facts: Leonardo DiCaprio and Joaquin Phoenix were originally in talks to play Eddie Adams / Dirk Diggler. Leo dropped out for Titanic.
Leo, I think, recommended Wahlberg for the role, too. Because I think when Leo dropped out, he was like, you should get this guy Mark Wahlberg in here, is what I read.
Yeah, either Leo or Joaquin did. I seem to remember looking that up as well during my research, but I didn't write it down, unfortunately. Bill Murray, Warren Beatty, Harvey Keitel, Albert Brooks were just some of the people who were in talks to play Jack Horner, which went to Burt Reynolds.
And man, I'm so glad it did.
Yeah, this is a great Burt Reynolds role. He apparently fought with PTA on set a lot.
Yeah.
And reportedly punched him at one point. There's rumors that he fired his agent after he saw a cut of the film, but
it's crazy to me that he doesn't like this or didn't like this movie.
Well, in 2012, he kind of denied rumors that he disliked it. He said that he liked the film regardless of his relationship with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah, it just doesn't like PTA, which, I mean, PTA kind of does have insufferable nerd energy. and I can imagine a Burt Reynolds type having some friction with that, especially Burt Reynolds, older, very well established, celebrated actor, and this nerdy little fucking dork behind the camera is like telling him to do shit different, right? I can imagine that pissing Burt Reynolds. Man, imagine being punched by Burt Reynolds. I would never wash my face if he punched me in the face.
This premiered at Toronto International Film Festival and made for $15 million. It earned $43.1 million. Nominated for several Oscars for Burt Reynolds, Julianne Moore, and for screenplay, but it didn't win any, but it won many critics awards. And today is recognized as one of the best films in the director's pretty immaculate filmography. I think there's probably a few people who would disagree that this is one of PTA's best films. So let's get deep and down and dirty.
13 inches deep, in fact. We do learn that is the length of Dirk Diggler's penis at the very, very end of this movie. He finally does say 13 inches. And I'm like, man, that is... I remembered it being 12. 13 is just 1 inch more than 1 inch more than the biggest penis anyone will probably ever see in their life, right? It is massive and then some.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
What a huge hog.
So let's get into the movie. We open in the San Fernando Valley in 1977 with a big theater marquee that says Boogie Nights. We're in it. We start in this nightclub sequence where we meet several of our main characters, including Luis Guzman, who plays Maurice Rodriguez, the owner of this club. Burt Reynolds, who plays pornographer Jack Horner. Julianne Moore, who plays his partner, and porn actress Amber Waves. They walk into this nightclub in this great oneer. There's tons of great oneers in this movie.
Yeah. I really like in this oneer and then in other ones that kind of occur at... There's a few parties in this movie, in this nightclub sequence and in some of the parties later. I love how in these oneers the camera just kind of glides around the party, and it really gives you as the viewer the feeling of like being there, right? It's kind of the experience of like being at like a fun happening place and kind of going from table to table, hearing little snippets of conversation. I just love how it's done.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of comparisons I can make with this movie to something like Goodfellas. In Goodfellas, there's the infamous Copacabana shot, which is a oneer as the main characters enter the Copacabana, and it gives you the feeling of entering this world. And I think this oneer has a similar effect at this point in the film. At the very beginning, you as the viewer are entering this strange new world for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's really skillfully done. I don't know if the oneers in this movie are actual oneers or if they're stitched, but regardless, they look great.
Yeah. Probably a good time for me to mention a couple things. Number one, this movie is kind of light on plot and very heavy on vibes.
Yep.
The plot is relatively simple, right? It's kind of your basic meteoric rise and fall rise to stardom and fall from stardom, right? Which a lot of movies have trod that territory, right? So on that level, it's pretty simple. I think where this movie really excels is just the vibes of this thing, just like both the good vibes at the beginning in the first half and the bad vibes in the second half. I feel like it's just so good at setting a mood and sitting in it, right? And this nightclub scene, which the movie opens on, really kind of gets you into it immediately. That's kind of what this movie is going to be doing, is like letting you sort of hang out in these situations with these characters, and just kind of sit with it a little bit. It's not really interested in like moving things along super fast. It's sort of got like a little bit of a lackadaisical pace, until it like speeds up at little points, right? Which I appreciate about this movie. And then also kind of in the same in the same kind of thought area, I was just watching this movie last night and going, I just want to hang out in every location in this movie. All of the locations in this movie just seem like such a fun place to just sit and chill for a little bit. The nightclub, the porno mansion later, but even some of the other locations later, like the fucking donut shop. I'm like, I want to hang out at that donut shop. It looks like such a cool place to chill. Even when Julianne Moore is at like the courthouse, there's like wood paneling in that in the room she's at the courthouse, and even that looks kind of cozy. Like all of it is just kind of like this cozy retro 70s. Like it all seems like so welcoming.
Yeah, unlike something like Goodfellas, which I feel like pivots from scenes and locations very quickly. It's very montage-like in that respect, and this film is too. But I think this film gives you more of an opportunity to sit in the locations with those characters and take in the atmosphere, and revisit these places in a way that they feel familiar and lived into you as the viewer. This nightclub is one of them. Jack Horner's home, where they shoot a lot of the porn videos and have parties, is another one. Porn films, yes. We'll get to that.
Film and video is a big distinction in this movie.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, back in this nightclub, we also meet Roller Girl, played by Heather Graham. She's wearing roller skates the whole movie. She has this kind of fun, peppy
This is my favorite character
vibe
in the movie. Roller Girl is so fun to me. I love that it's such like it's one of those character things that where she never ever takes the skates off, that it's so close to being outlandishly strange, but it's like grounded enough that it's just like, I love just that extra little piece of weirdness with that character, where it's like, what is her deal with these fucking skates? Yeah. Is it a fetish thing for her? Also, bad porn starlet for foot fetishists, Roller Girl. You're not seeing those toes at all. They're never coming out of the skates.
And the camera just kind of drifts throughout this nightclub as we meet all these characters and get introduced to this world. And the camera lands on Mark Wahlberg, little Marky Mark.
Yeah.
Playing Eddie Adams. He's a busboy. This is maybe the first lead actor in a film that we've covered that I can definitively say that going into this film, I have negative associations with Mark Wahlberg as opposed to positive ones. Pretty much every other actor, lead actor, Sylvester Stallone, Rutger Hauer, Donald Gleason, I like all of those people.
Right.
Mark Wahlberg is a good actor when a director uses him well. This movie is an example of that, I think.
Yeah.
The Departed is another example. I would even venture to say he's okay in Ted, directed by Seth MacFarlane, because he has to interact with a CGI teddy bear, and he just kind of gets to be a loser in that. But Mark Wahlberg, in addition to having very dark aspects of his personal life that are out there, has just been fed to us by Hollywood as your standard everyman action hero over and over again, and it does not work for me.
Yeah. I basically have nothing to add there other than that I agree completely. Like, yeah, those are my exact feelings on Wahlberg. Remember when he said that if him and his family were on the plane that hit one of the towers on 9/11, it would have gone down different, and he would have killed all the terrorists and saved everybody's lives?
Yeah.
What a fucking dickhead.
And that's not even the worst thing he's done.
No. The hate crimes
are there.
The hate crimes are worse. It's just, what a fucking insanely narcissistic and crazy thing to say.
It's funny that he has a burger restaurant called Wahlburgers. I mean, I guess if my last name is Wahlberg and I wanted to open a burger restaurant, I guess I'd name it that. But yeah,
I've never been to a Wahlburgers. I can't imagine that it's great. Maybe it is. I don't know. I would be interested to try a Wahlburger.
Yeah. But this is one of his earliest roles, I think, and one that I think he looks back on negatively.
He's made some comments about regretting doing this movie, and it's part of it is he's just a very devout Catholic, I think Catholic, Christian of some kind. I believe he's Catholic. And very devout. And this movie is about fucking and sucking. And I think that, and also doing lots of drugs. And I think maybe he just feels a little bit of Jesus guilt associated with that. Is kind of the vibe that I've gotten from some of his interviews that he's done about it.
I hope he feels some Jesus guilt about those things that he said to Asian people.
Yes.
I hope.
Yes. Or, his comment about 9/11. Because the people whose families were on that plane probably didn't like that very much. It is funny, though, because when he made that comment about regretting being in Boogie Nights, I think Julianne Moore did an interview pretty shortly after that, where she was like, he should actually be very happy that he was in Boogie Nights because it made his whole career. Which I thought was a very funny comment from her. Being like, regretting that is dumb because it is what made him a star.
Yeah, she's not wrong. This is one of his best performances, I think.
Yeah. I think it's the best I have literally ever seen him. I like him in The Departed, but I like this performance better.
Yeah. So we're in this club. We see Eddie. Mark Wahlberg is working there as a busboy, and Burt Reynolds notices him. We also meet William H. Macy, who plays Little Bill. We'll talk more about Little Bill later.
Yeah.
Eddie goes back to the kitchen, and Burt Reynolds follows him back there. And they have a pretty casual little conversation.
Yes, which basically turns into... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It basically turns into Jack Horner being like, I could tell from looking at you that you have a huge hog. It's basically what the conversation veers into.
Yeah.
And Mark Wahlberg is basically Eddie here is like 5 or 10. And Jack's like, what? And he's like, well, if you want to watch me jack off, it's $10, but if you just want to look at it, it's only $5.
He also reveals that he's 17.
Yes. This is we'll talk about this later. Put a pin in that. I have a point about this later. But yes, he's 17 years old.
And Jack's trying to get him interested in the porn industry, doing the kind of producer, like, you could be a big star talk. Great line here. I bet there's something wonderful beneath those jeans just waiting to get out. Yeah. And again, he says this after discovering that this is a child.
Yes. Yeah. Jack Horner is not a good or blameless character. He is exploiting this actual child. Roller Girl's also still in high school. We assume she's 18 because she's already appearing in adult films, but it's the 70s. I don't know how much we were checking that shit back then, so it's entirely possible that she is also underage. We don't really know.
Yeah. Later, we see a bit of the home life and a bit of the reality of these characters after kind of the glitz and glamour of the nightclub, where Burt Reynolds and Julianne Moore go home. We find out that Julianne Moore is divorced and has a kid.
Yeah.
And she's on the phone with her ex-husband, kind of fighting. And William H. Macy gets home.
Yeah. Okay. Cinema's premiere cuckold.
Yeah.
William H. Macy.
William H. Macy gets home and finds his wife having sex with another man.
Yeah, and
his wife played by I want to say the great Nina Hartley.
You can say the great Nina Hartley.
Nina Hartley's a porn actress.
Yes.
I kind of want to say that just to say it.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a field of performance where people can be skilled and great performers.
Yeah.
Right. It's its own skill set. It takes its own type of talent. So yeah. I think the great Nina Hartley is fair.
And she's had decades of work in the industry. She's still working today.
Wow.
Like very, very respected.
Yeah.
among that industry.
Yes.
So,
a consummate professional.
Yes.
So she's playing William H. Macy's wife, and she's like fucking another guy in their bedroom, and you get from William H. Macy's reaction immediately that this is not the first or even fifth time this has happened. This is her thing, right? She is constantly always fucking other men. And William H. Macy, man, he just takes it.
Yep.
She's
like, go sleep on the couch or something. And
and he does.
He does.
Because he is the most pathetic, fucking downtrodden, I was saying to the podmaster, because the podmaster was watching the first half of this movie and then she had to go to bed. She will finish the movie eventually. But we were watching this together and I was describing William H. Macy to her as just the character in anything whose life you would want to live the least. Right? And William H. Macy is perfect casting for that type of guy. He is so good at playing a guy whose life is absolute dog shit. Anyway, yeah.
Mark Wahlberg gets home and we see that, in fact, he does have a big dick just through his pants. And he checks himself out in the mirror in his underwear, starts doing karate moves to kind of hype himself up. This is something he will do for the remainder of the film.
Yes.
In the morning, we see that he has kind of a rough home life.
Mm-hmm.
His parents aren't happy with each other, or with him working late nights and working. He's working 2 jobs, I think. And the nightclub is across town.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's explicitly stated in the movie, but I was getting the vibes that this is a stepdad scenario. I don't even know if this is his real dad, just because this guy playing his father figure he talks kind of awkwardly and kind of in a stilted way to his son. So I was just getting stepdad vibes from that, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and I think this was partially based on Paul Thomas Anderson's actual relationship with his mother. So that kind of feeds into this awkward home dynamic that we see here. We also meet Don Cheadle, who plays Buck Swope, which is a great name. He's working at a stereo store. Quick note here. He's trying to sell this stereo to a guy. It's called the TK421.
Yes, TK421 from Star Wars.
From Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I was just like, fucking nerds, man. It's also my fault. I'm a nerd because I know that. I heard that and I knew it immediately.
I did too. I heard it in the Stormtrooper walkie-talkie voice. TK421. Yeah. Also, a quick note on this stereo store scene with Buck. He's trying to sell this guy a stereo. Number one, just a fun bit of trivia. The guy who he's selling the stereo to is the guy who played Dirk Diggler in the original mockumentary that this movie was adapted from. But then also, when he's trying to sell the stereo to this guy, he puts in like an 8-track tape of just fucking immaculate hoedown bluegrass shredding, and the guy doesn't like it, and then the store owner like yells at Buck and is like, "Oh, you're playing that country shit, you're never gonna sell any stereos that way." And I was like, if Don Cheadle, the most charismatic and handsome man who's ever lived, 1997 Don Cheadle, right, was working in a stereo store, and I was there as a customer, and he fucking stuck in this 8-track of just fire fucking hoedown bluegrass, I would be buying 3 of those stereo systems. I don't know what this guy's fucking problem is. Anyway.
Yeah. We get a brief scene of Roller Girl, and we find out she's in high school.
Not for long. She drops out in that scene.
She's taking a test, and this guy is looking at her making blowjob faces.
Yeah. Clearly, he's aware that of what she is doing in her extracurricular time.
Right. And she, sure enough, still has those roller skates on. So she puts down her pencil and just rolls out of the classroom.
Rolls right out of school.
I'm sure you would get dress coded for that. Like,
I don't know.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's the 70s. Even the teachers were on acid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we also then get another scene here with Eddie where he's like with his like high school girlfriend or whatever. And this is where I just wanted to point this scene out really quick because they're like having sex or whatever, or they're about to have sex. And he kind of has a like almost spiritual moment about his own penis. where he's thinking about the offer that Jack gave him basically to come see him to be in some movies, and we see him really considering this, and he says everyone's blessed with one special thing, which kind of becomes like a little bit of a character mantra for him throughout the movie, where he's basically like, and it's hard for people who haven't seen the movie, it's hard to overstate how sincere he is about how his penis is a special gift that he has a responsibility to the world to share.
Yeah.
It's not played, he's not playing it as a joke. Eddie fully believes this. He's like, my penis is so special that I have a responsibility to the world to be a porn actor.
He's playing this directionless high school kid who finally finds purpose and meaning in the most unexpected and unlikely of places.
His own dick.
And just like the porn industry in general, and kind of brazenly and naively fully embraces it.
Right.
Never gives it a second thought.
And that's kind of the thing about, just to spend like just a second on Wahlberg's performance and what I like about it so much. One of the things that really works for me about Wahlberg in this movie is he's playing so much of like this wide-eyed, boyish naivete, right? And it works so well even later in the movie when he becomes a little bit less sympathetic. You still get the sense that this is a kid who's in over his head, right? And it's like he's a kid who has a very bad home life, and then the coolest guy in the world, Burt Reynolds, tells him he's special, right? And that just he takes it to heart, right? And he starts believing it so sincerely that it becomes like it's like almost it's almost religious, his belief in his destiny, right? He believes that he is like fated to be a great porn star, right? And it's the way that he plays that kind of that boyish sense of wonder about the whole thing. I think it works so well, and it also works because he comes across, I think intentionally, as very dumb.
Yeah.
Right?
He is what we would call a himbo.
Yes, Eddie Adams is a huge himbo, right? And it's like it makes you like him more because you're like, he doesn't understand that he doesn't understand when he's being ridiculous, right? Like with the music career stuff later in the movie. He doesn't understand that he is a joke, right? It's like, to him it's all so serious. And he's trying so hard, right? He's just not very bright. And I love it. Anyway.
And I think it endears you to the character. Like, you are in a way rooting for the character.
You sort of want to protect him. Like you're upset when bad stuff starts happening to him because it's like, oh, this little baby boy.
And when he kind of loses his way a bit in the second half, you want him to find his purpose and his meaning again. And part of it is, and I guess what I realized by the end of this movie, we'll talk about it when we get to the final moments of the movie. This movie is about a family.
Yeah.
This movie is about kind of a fucked up little family.
Yes.
That in this strange way does care for each other.
Yeah.
And is there for each other in a way that they don't have in their personal lives. We see, because this montage here perfectly illustrates that. In their real lives and their real lives at home, there is no glitz and glamour. They have to confront the real struggles of living in America and living with abusive families and broken families. Yeah. So together in the San Fernando Valley in the 70s, in Jack Horner's house, they find this little community that they can build.
Yeah.
Which is the strangest thing to discover in a movie that is about people sucking and fucking.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also just one of the things I like the most about the movie. I like that this movie simultaneously shows the porn industry and the people who work in it as kind of people who exist on the brink of depravity and true evil, which we will get to in some of the second half stuff, right? But also people who are empathetic and who have souls and who deserve to be loved, right? I like that the movie kind of does both, right? Where it's like, yeah, these people kind of exist on the fringe of society and therefore are closer to darkness, but also they deserve to be held and to be cared for. They deserve to find family, you know? And I like that the movie has that attitude toward its characters.
I think we should jump ahead to Eddie and Roller Girl having sex for the first time. At the nightclub, Roller Girl goes into the kitchen and sucks Eddie's dick in the walk-in.
Yep.
Later that night, they offer him a ride, and he goes back to Jack Horner's place.
Yeah.
Or they go to dinner.
Yeah, they do go to a diner first, and Burt Reynolds basically does his whole spiel about how great the porn industry is, how great he thinks Eddie could be, and basically the whole time Eddie is staring at Julianne Moore, as one is wont to do.
Yes.
She is gorgeous in this movie. The Podmaster and I both probably have a crush on Julianne Moore, I think. She's not so sure about that. She's one of your gals. You like Julianne Moore. She's lower tier gal. Yeah, okay. You like Gillian Anderson better.
One of the great joys of this podcast is watching Justus interpret his wife's hand signals.
Yes, because she refuses to speak on the podcast. Yes. Anyway, so Julianne Moore, she's a bombshell in this movie. A woman has rarely looked better than Julianne Moore does in this movie. So they have the diner thing. They're kind of convincing Eddie. He doesn't require that much convincing. He seems like he's pretty all in.
Right. They go back to Jack Horner's place, and Burt Reynolds tells them to just start fucking on the couch, and he's gonna sit and watch him.
Yep. And Eddie's like totally cool with it. He's like, all right.
He's just puffing on his cigar, and he's gonna watch him bang.
Yeah.
Roller Girl, of course, does not take her skates off.
No, and she puts on, I've got a brand new pair of roller skates. Which, brief second to talk about the needle drops in this movie. How do you feel about, there's a lot of big pop needle drops in this movie. How do you feel about that?
70s pop, funk, that sound is not my favorite type of music. Not that I dislike it. I just don't know a ton of it. It's not what I grew up listening to. I grew up listening to 70s hard rock and prog rock.
Yeah.
So a lot of the needle drops are recognizable to me, but I couldn't necessarily name the artist or the song. But they all work. They basically all work. They all rule. It's a great soundtrack that was assembled with a lot of care, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted kind of your feelings on it, and if there was anything that stuck out, as maybe like a distracting choice or anything to you, but I totally agree. No. I think they all work.
Thrown in a Scorsese comparison again, much like Goodfellas, there are a billion songs in this movie, and they all rule.
Yes.
And they're all used extremely well.
Yes, and a lot of them are really on the nose. Like, if you listen to a lot of the needle drops and like the point they happen in the movie, it's like the lyrics are basically directly referencing what is happening on screen, which in a movie made with less intention and care, might have me rolling my eyes. But in this movie, I'm like, no, it rocks. It's so good. Anyway, yeah.
Later, Eddie gets home, and his mom gets mad at him for being out all night, and starts berating him and calling him stupid.
Which, to be fair, he is quite dumb.
Yeah, but it's just such a...
But his mom shouldn't be yelling it at him.
I love his reaction where he just says, "Stop being mean to me."
Yeah, that is heartbreaking. It's really sad.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
And immediately it's like, this kid has nothing. He has nothing going for him.
Yeah.
And, why not take this strange, weird opportunity, despite the wild implications of a 17-year-old being in a porn film.
Right.
But I was surprised at how, when I watched this movie for the first time, it was a case of, I recognize this is well made. I had a good time with this, but I didn't have a ton of emotional investment in these characters. And this scene gave me a lot of emotional investment in Eddie.
It really makes you root for him because it's like the moment where his mom is trying to tear down all of his posters on the wall, because his wall is decked out in typical 17-year-old boy room style where he's got posters of cars and hot babes in bikinis and stuff, and she starts like tearing at all his posters, and he, with so much desperation and heartbreak, he's just like, why are you doing that? Like it, and it's just a moment that you should not, as a kid, have with your parent, right? Where their anger seems irrational to you, right? And he's so scared of her, and so, like, again, he just wants to be loved. Like, he needs someone to hold him and tell him that he's good, right? And he's getting the opposite of that at home. And it really makes you feel for him, and makes you, if not root for him, yes, go 17-year-old, go be in those porn movies. It at least makes you happy to see Burt Reynolds and Julianne Moore being nice to him, right? It's like they're kind to him, right? And yeah, it's just it's very effective. Even though it's a pretty short scene.
Yeah. We get to another huge scene in this movie. One of the big, great long scenes of this movie. Basically, Eddie is totally left home. He's not coming back. It is a party at Jack Horner's house.
Yep, porno pool party.
Yeah, we meet so many of these other characters. We meet Reed, played by John C. Reilly.
Yes.
I love how they just immediately become best friends.
Yes, because they are both stupid.
We've said this before, we're strength athletes. The moment where they ask each other, how much can you bench? Okay, we'll say it after we count to 3. Oh, you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
So cute.
Yes.
I love it so much.
Yeah, because they're trying to, like, one-up each other.
Yeah.
And we get the sense that John C. Reilly is the bigger, like, one-upper because they ask each other about the squat before that. And Eddie says he can squat 200 pounds. And then John C. Reilly's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can do 350. So that's just kind of his vibe, where he's like, anything that you're good at, I'm, like, casually better at, you know. He's also a magician.
Yeah.
John C. Reilly, not an actor I typically enjoy. I'm not a big John C. Reilly fan. I don't find his thing particularly effective for me personally. He's great in this movie. I love him.
I like John C. Reilly.
Yeah.
I like him maybe more than I should. I don't know. It's another case of when he's directed well. Yeah. And is given something he can sink his teeth into comedically. Mm-hmm. I think he's funny as hell. I think he was kind of lumped in with Will Ferrell a lot. Yeah. And that's part of it. Obviously, they have great chemistry, but I think Will Ferrell I'm way more hit and miss on. But when John C. Reilly is used well, like with his Tim and Eric stuff or in Walk Hard, I think he's super funny. Mm. I'm maybe less sold on him as a dramatic actor.
Yeah. Have you ever seen We Need to Talk About Kevin?
I haven't seen that.
He's the dad in that. Totally doesn't work for me in that movie. Like, good movie, and I don't think there's anything wrong with his performance. It's just, you can't separate John C. Reilly from his comedic kind of persona, right? And so as a dramatic actor in that movie, which is very, very unfunny film, right? It just doesn't work for me at all. Like, anytime he's on screen in that movie, it's like jarring to me. Anyway.
Yeah, he's in, I believe the film that PTA did after this called Magnolia, which Magnolia is probably my least favorite PTA movie of the ones that I've seen. He does not work for me at all in that movie.
Yeah.
And something like Chicago. I don't like Chicago to begin with, but I don't think he's good in Chicago.
I've never seen Chicago, so I have no thoughts on that. Yeah.
But he's great in this movie.
Yes.
I agree. And this is a great scene, a great introduction to his character. we get another crazy oneer of the camera drifting throughout this party, and there's a part where it goes into the pool and goes underwater.
It's so good. And then it comes out of the water when the swimmer comes out. It's like, it's
kick-ass.
What can you even say about the oneer in this party other than fantastic movie making 26-year-old Paul Thomas Anderson? I want to kill myself.
William H. Macy, Little Bill.
Speaking of wanting to kill yourself.
We'll get there. Oh boy. Comes across his wife getting fucked while a bunch of people just stand in a circle and watch.
A huge crowd is just watching this guy rail his wife in the driveway. And like, again, she walks up and is like, "What are you doing?" And I actually really like this. He goes, "What are you doing?" And then one of the guys in the circle turns to him and goes, "What does it look like?" But yeah, so he has to tuck his pathetic little tail between his legs and just let this happen. Also, this is when people start calling him Little Bill, which again, just working in the porn industry, and your wife is constantly fucking other men, even off camera, and everyone calls you Little Bill. So fucking humiliating.
Oh yeah.
He's just such a little pain pig in this movie. But then he starts walking away, and one of the camera guys, I think his name Kurt?
Yes.
Yeah. So Kurt and Little Bill are having a conversation just about like the shoot that they're gonna do, and in the background, in the foreground of the shot, it's William H. Macy and this other actor playing Kurt, and in the background of the shot, his wife is just continuing to get fucked. With a huge crowd standing around her. And Little Bill is having trouble focusing on the conversation with Kurt. And he's like, "Can we talk about this later?" And he has a really funny line where he says, "My fucking wife has an ass in her cock in the driveway."
I guess that was a mistake. Like William H. Macy.
I would imagine, yeah.
That wasn't in the script. And PTA just left it in.
Yeah.
Because it totally works.
Yes, because he's so flustered and upset in the moment.
You get the impression that everyone knows this is happening.
Yes.
And no one cares.
No one cares. No one gives a shit about Little Bill. Is really kind of the thing. People are not mean to him. People are kind to him. Like Don Cheadle especially seems like he likes Little Bill, but nobody gives a shit. And it's because they're all in the porn industry. It's like, "Oh yeah, your wife's fucking other dudes. We all fuck each other, right? All of us are constantly fucking each other. Like, what's your problem?" Right? Yeah. And this is just a man who shouldn't be in this business, right? He's not cut out for this world. And he shouldn't be part of this. But he's in too deep now, right? This is how he makes his money.
Not as deep as that guy is
in
his wife.
Based on the nickname Little Bill, I'm guessing he's never been as deep as that guy.
This is another hilarious moment where there's a character named the Colonel, who's another kind of big shot producer.
Yep.
And Burt Reynolds and the Colonel find a girl who's OD'd on coke in like a bedroom of Jack Horner's house.
I shouldn't laugh because it's sort of a dark moment, but it's also pretty funny.
But it's also this movie is a black comedy.
Yes,
basically.
Totally. Right.
And the guy that she's with, he's like, he gets really emotional. He's like, "This is twice in 2 days a chick has OD'd on me."
Yes, and the Colonel responds, "It seems like you should get some new shit." And yeah, so they carry this OD'd girl out of the party.
And as they carry her out, we meet Scotty J.
Yes,
played by the late great
yes.
Philip Seymour Hoffman,
legendary character actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. I know he died a pretty long time ago at this point. Anytime I see him in a movie, I get so sad because he was so fucking good, and it's so heartbreaking that he went with so many years left in him. You know what I'm saying?
And such a chameleon who could turn his hand at any type of character, really.
Yeah.
And this is unlike a lot of the other characters I've seen him play.
Yeah. And he rocks in this performance. He's so good. He is so Scotty J, when we meet him here, basically the first thing that happens is he walks into the party, sees Eddie sitting by the pool, and the camera like vignettes does the little it's just a circle, Mark Wahlberg in the center, and the rest of the screen is black.
Yep.
Right? Because the only thing that Scotty J is seeing is Eddie, and he basically falls in love with him at first sight. And that's kind of Philip Seymour Hoffman's thing for the rest of the movie, is he is in love with Eddie, and unrequited love, and it's heartbreaking. Scotty is another character that the movie really makes you feel for, and it's you just want to hold him and take care of him, and you want him to be loved, and it's sad that he is like so head over heels for this guy who is never gonna feel the same way about him, you know?
Yeah. A really great performance from Philip Seymour Hoffman, and the film just immediately endears you to him and makes you feel empathetic to him and treats him with a lot of respect.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's obviously important. A portrayal of a gay character in 1997, which, you know, 97, you would think that we would be doing a good job of that by then. Kind of not so much. If you watch a lot of movies from the 90s, the treatment of gay characters is not fantastic. Neither David nor I are gay men, so we can't really speak holistically to the representation in this film. But you know, from where I was sitting, I felt like Scotty J is pretty well rounded, and a pretty good execution of a gay character in this movie.
The Colonel is introduced to Mark Wahlberg and says one of the great lines of this movie. Jack says, "You got a great big cock.
May I see it?"
and Mark Wahlberg does pull down his pants.
Yeah, he's like, "Sure."
And he just kind of looks at it.
He
and
looks
goes,
down
and is still like kind of half smiling to himself. And yep.
And then he goes, "Well, thank you, Eddie."
Hilarious.
Hilarious until later when it isn't. Yes. Anyway.
He also tells Eddie to come up with a name. And later that night in Jack Horner's hot tub, one of the really good scenes in this movie, one of the great moments in this movie, is Mark Wahlberg telling Jack Horner his name. Mm-hmm. And the way he describes it as he sees this name in lights, and it's Dirk Diggler.
Yes, and the name is so powerful that it makes the sign like explode.
And we actually see that happened.
Which I fucking love that PTA included that.
Yeah.
That it cuts away from the scene and you do see the neon sign Dirk Diggler, and then it sparks and flames shoot up. It's just, yeah. It's letting you into Eddie's head and letting you know how much he believes in this dream. You know?
Burt has a great line here where he says, "I think heaven has sent you here, Dirk Diggler. I think the angels have blessed us all with you." And it's another line that reinforces this idea of this is Eddie's destiny.
Yes, it's his grand quest to fuck a bunch of hot ladies on camera with his giant penis. Yeah, and that's how the party scene ends, right? Is him choosing the name Dirk Diggler.
Yeah. Our next large scene here is shooting. Dirk's first day shooting. Mm-hmm. And we get another scene of him hyping himself up in the mirror. And just to drive it home, Philip Seymour Hoffman walks in to lets him know that they're ready for him on set, and he's chewing on his pen, mm-hmm. and very clearly just wants to fuck Mark Wahlberg.
Yes, yeah. So then they go to shoot the scene, and it's Eddie and Amber, which is Julianne Moore's character. It is very funny when they start shooting the porn scene. You go from these very good performances by Wahlberg and Moore, and then you start seeing through the camera in kind of like the 70s film style, right? you see what is being shot, and the performances, as soon as it's part of the porno, turns so wooden and so like stilted, because it's, you know, it's Amber acting and Eddie acting, right? Not Mark Wahlberg acting as Eddie, right? So it's like their performances as the characters are naturalistic, but their characters' performances in the porno are like so bad.
Well, and it's stereotypical 70s double entendre laden porn dialogue.
Right.
Just the worst puns you can imagine.
Yeah, and even the shots in the porno, like the plot parts of the porno that you see in the movie, like even the shots are poorly composed. Like this first one, it's literally just Julianne Moore and Mark Wahlberg standing basically completely parallel to each other, just facing directly face to face. It's like it's not dynamic at all. It's like so like boring and like shoddy, right? And I'm like, that is so funny that PTA as a filmmaker was like, let's intentionally make this shit look bad and like porn acting.
Yeah.
Right?
There's tons of it throughout the movie that we won't get into all of it in great detail, but it's all remarkably well done, especially because I think a lot of times in a movie when they're trying to recreate an old style of filmmaking for a movie within a movie, it feels slightly artificial to me. This feels very realistic with the film grain, with the type of editing, with the acting, with the way the shots are composed.
Yeah.
It all looks like something that is very clearly just taken out of the 70s.
Yeah. And here also we get another one of the great lines, or at least great line deliveries of the movie, where you know, the little plot bit of the porno kind of comes to a close. Julianne Moore takes off Mark Wahlberg's pants and looks at his dick, and then she looks up at him and goes, "This is a giant cock." In just the most like wooden monotone. It's so funny.
So about that moment where Julianne Moore unsheathes Mark Wahlberg's cock. We don't actually see the cock.
No.
Not a ton of nudity or like very explicit fucking in this movie.
No, you get full frontal from Heather Graham, who plays Roller Girl.
Right, and some from a few other characters.
Yeah, and you see Julianne Moore, you see her boobs in this scene. She's topless in this scene when they're shooting the porno. But yeah, you don't see any hog until the very, very end.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back to Astrid Klock's Cinema 101 class. Something called the Kuleshov effect. It's an editing term where the idea is that two shots together are more meaningful than one shot in isolation. So an example that's often used is a picture of a man's face is informed by what precedes it. So, for instance, the shot of a woman in lingerie followed by the shot of a man's blank, emotionless face implies that he's looking at her lustily. I might be talking out of my ass, but there is a use of the Kuleshov effect here when Mark Wahlberg takes his pants off and we see everyone's reaction to his giant penis.
Yes.
And everyone's emotion on their face is informed by the shot, the implied shot.
Yes.
Of Mark Wahlberg's taking his pants off, or Julianne Moore taking Mark Wahlberg's pants off.
Yes. No, I don't think you're talking out of your ass. I think that's totally right on the money. Yeah.
Absolutely one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yes.
And I think the highlight of it is Philip Seymour Hoffman's operating a boom mic and is like trembling and crying at the sight of this giant penis.
It's like you remember the Lonely Island Jizz in My Pants video?
Yes.
Yeah. It's basically Scotty J is spooge in his drawers here.
I like William H. Macy's on set. He's on the crew. I like his reaction too. He's kind of it implies like, oh, well, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we shoot the porno, and you see it's not explicit, like David said. You're not seeing P and V, but you do get a lot of them shooting the porn. And I love the way that this scene is constructed and the way it's shot. It's basically silent except for the noises of shooting a porno, right? So you can hear the film in the camera, right? And you can hear kind of ambient noise from the set, and then you just hear Julianne Moore and Mark Wahlberg making sex noises. But there's no music. There's no scoring here. And there's some really cool, very close-up shots on the equipment being used to record the scene, right? Lots of close-up shots of the lens of the film camera, the film going through all of the camera's internal mechanisms, right? It's just fun and cool how they construct this sequence.
Yeah, and there are moments where they stop and they plan the next shot and everyone checks in with each other. And again, I think it's kind of a humanizing moment for this movie that shows that this is legitimate work for people. Like, these are people who have jobs, who want to do their jobs well and treat it very professionally. Mm-hmm. And Mark Wahlberg's performance is great here. He's just so excited.
Yes. And just very eager to work and learn and do his thing.
And he's just asking people, like, was it sexy? And it's great.
And this is also an important moment with the dynamic between Amber and Eddie, right? Their characters. Because this is where she starts becoming porno mommy. Like, she is Dirk Diggler's fuck mommy. Which is very uncomfortable, and the movie is not telling you to like it, right? It's not saying this is a good and healthy relationship that they have. It's complicated, right?
It's complicated, I think, more so than anything else, than the movie casting it in a negative light.
Yes. And I didn't mean to imply that. The movie's not unilaterally positive or negative about this. The movie is presenting it to you as complicated. Because on the one hand, his own mom, we've seen, be horrible to him. And you want him to be treated nicely, like I said before. And Julianne Moore is so sweet to him and is like, she when they pause to like reset the film in the camera, she asks him if he's okay. She's like, are you okay? Right? Like checking in with him. And it's like very sweet. She very clearly cares about him a lot, right? But then later in the movie, she says the quiet part out loud, but we're already getting the feeling that she kind of feels maternal about him, which is weird because they are fucking a bunch.
Right.
It's Oedipal.
Yeah. Freud would have a field day with this.
Oh, yeah. Also, Freud would have a field day with PTA, considering apparently the Eddie character's relationship with his mother is maybe based on PTA's relationship with his mom, and then PTA writes this relationship for that character. It's like, mommy issues, huh? Anyway.
It's a great sequence. I love that there's this little detail where Amber wants him to come on her breasts.
Yeah.
But during the scene, she asks him to come inside of her.
Yes.
And that is just a really good way to showcase how good Mark Wahlberg is at fucking and being a porn star.
Yes. And also, in addition to feeling kind of maternal about him, we also kind of do get the vibe. This is one of the moments where she tells him to cream pie her. But there's a few more moments where we also kind of get the vibe that it's a mixture of she has maternal feelings about him and is maybe also sort of in love with him, like romantically a little bit. Yeah. It's complicated. Anyway.
So that's basically the end of this scene. We montage through the next few years, really, where we see his rise in the porn industry. buying clothes, lots of disco dancing and nightlife shots.
Yeah, he's winning awards.
Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly come up with the idea of elevating their porn movies and creating something new.
Right.
And they come up with the idea of the Brock Landers franchise, which is going to be this kind of spy porn franchise that's going to be new and exciting for them and something that they're going to be known for.
Yeah, I do want to call out here that when in this scene where they're talking about inventing Brock Landers and Chest Rockwell, right? The reference in this scene that Mark Wahlberg makes to he talks about that Holmes guy who has this character Johnny Wad. This is important to call out.
Yes.
John Holmes was an actual 70s porn star, and Johnny Wad was his actual porn character name. He did a similar, like this movie is intentionally including this as an Easter egg reference because they're basically copying some stuff from real life here. Johnny Wad was like a private investigator, detective, spy character, right? Who was in these types of porn films where there was like a plot, there was like fight scenes and action and stuff, but then also just like unsimulated sex, right? And not only that, but John Holmes is the real life inspiration for the character of Eddie Adams / Dirk Diggler. And there is a sort of interesting true crime story associated with John Holmes. He got into kind of the throes of drug addiction as Dirk Diggler does later in the movie, right? So that's copied from his life as well. And he fell in with a gang in LA called the Wonderland Gang. And there was essentially there was some gang violence that happened between the Wonderland Gang and this gangster Eddie Nash, who is the inspiration for Alfred Molina's character later in this movie. And basically it culminated with probably no one was ever convicted, so you can't say for sure, but probably what happened is Eddie Nash and his guys went to the Wonderland gang's house in LA and beat the shit out of all of them to a fucking pulp. And it was like one of the grisliest crime scenes of the decade. Like the LAPD were like, we've never seen anything like it. There was like brains on the ceiling. Like these guys were fucking murdered. And John Holmes, we don't know what his involvement was, but he was there. They found, I think, his handprints at the crime scene, like in blood, from the Wonderland Gang. And it's speculated whether Eddie Nash made him participate, or whether he was trying to frame Holmes, or whether he was trying to blackmail Holmes so that Holmes didn't fuck around with any other rival gangs in the future. But yeah, very dark, interesting, compelling true crime story that is the inspiration for some of the darker elements of this movie. And they just reference it in the scene when he mentions Holmes and Johnny Wad. So I wanted to call that out.
Yeah, and I think he's also specifically referencing that the Johnny Wad films are... the Johnny Wad character is violent towards women and smacks them around and stuff, and misogynistic. So he wants to do something different with Brock Landers. Right,
which I kind of think is PTA also. It's kind of a meta comment by PTA, basically being like, I'm taking inspiration from the real John Holmes, but I want Eddie / Dirk Diggler to be like a nicer version of that. I feel like that is kind of PTA, you know, just commenting as the director and as the writer, basically being like, yeah, like this guy's based on John Holmes, but he's like the nice version. He's the nice little boy version instead of the actual version. Which, by the way, John Holmes, a terrible fucking guy, literal child predator. He like groomed a preteen and then like essentially traveled the country with her and separated her from her family, and terrible human being. Anyway,
thanks for doing the John Holmes research, because I
just had that all living in my brain.
Was
dog.
Not gonna Google that. For those,
sorry. Apparently, the Podmaster has informed me that some of what I said may not have been accurate, but it's fine. You can do your own Googling. I don't give a shit.
If it's not clear already, Justus and his wife are the true crime nerds of the podcast. So.
Yeah, she more than me, which is why she's correcting me mid-record about how I'm spreading misinformation. Once again, apologies to the estate of John Holmes.
There's a scene at Dirk Diggler's new house where he's showing it off to everyone and has a party. And the only thing that's notable about this that I want to mention is he gets a new Corvette, and also he has a painting commission for him that looks like shit.
It looks so bad.
And the person is like, yeah, I think I really captured your essence. It's so funny.
Yeah. And he is in this scene showing Amber all of his new toys, all of his new stuff, and it is very much like, "Aren't you proud of me, mommy?" vibes.
Definitely.
Weird relationship.
But we end up at New Year's Eve, 1980.
Yes. Here we fucking go. Yeah, New Year's Eve party. Similar party vibes to the pool party initially. Where everybody's kind of having a good time, but there's quickly a few things at this party that indicate that things are maybe not going so well. We do kind of have the first moment of the first inkling of Dirk not being just a delightful, polite, boyish guy, his normal affable self, because he does blow off this girl that he's talking to completely to go with Amber. Amber's like, "Come with me," and he's like, "Okay, bye."
Yeah,
right?
they go upstairs to a bedroom, and Amber's basically like, "I love you so much. We're gonna do great things together," and it has that kind of that strange Oedipal vibe to it, but it also seems, sweet and endearing a little bit. And then she's immediately like, "Now I'm going to introduce you to cocaine."
Yes, time to do coke with your porno mommy. And he does. And so this is the first time we see him using drugs in the movie. So that happens here. And then also this a not so negative thing that happens here is the girl who Dirk blew off to go with Amber goes over and starts talking to Buck. I don't remember her character's name.
I don't either.
But she starts talking to Buck, and we kind of get the beginnings of a little bit of pseudo-romantic banter between the two of them. Buck in this scene is wearing a pretty hilarious wig. And he's trying to make the look work for him, and then he abandons it pretty quickly because he realizes it kind of looks like shit. And yeah, so we see them kind of chatting, and that's going to be important later because they get together.
There's another porn producer, big shot, named
Yes.
Floyd Gondoli, played by Philip Baker Hall.
Yes.
Who another collaborator with PTA.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks to Jack and the Colonel about the future of porn moving out of the theaters and onto home cassettes. And
yeah, videotape. Shot on videotape is the future.
And I love, there's a few movies I can think of where a big shot porn producer, porn director is a character. I'm thinking of Big Lebowski.
Mm-hmm.
And even in X, which is about this kind of this little small porno crew shooting a porn movie in the 70s, where the characters are like, we can elevate porn beyond just people fucking and sucking on film. Like, we are actual auteurs.
Right. We're artists. We're creating cinema. Yes.
And I find that hilarious.
Yeah. But I also like that this movie sort of doesn't treat that as a joke.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? And later on when the porn does lose some of its artistry, when we see that happen later in the movie, it is tragic. It makes you sad as the viewer.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, it does humanize these people and show that this is a legitimate profession.
Right.
And they are passionate about their art.
They're passionate about it, and they're talented at it. Maybe not the acting part.
And I'd argue that Big Lebowski and X kind of play that up more for comedy.
Right.
Those are the examples that I can just think of right now.
Yeah, but this movie kind of wants you to believe in these people's dreams.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I just find it a little funny.
Yes.
But Burt Reynolds pushes back against this and still believes that the quality of porn filmmaking lies in the theaters. He's totally resistant to moving to video cassettes.
Yeah. Another problem that he has is the Philip Baker Hall character is also working with like amateurs as opposed to professional porn actors, and he doesn't like that either. He's basically like, no, like you need people with like talent and charisma in front of the camera. You can't just throw any two people on camera and have them fuck each other. Like that's not how it works.
I like Philip Baker Hall's line where he says, "I like cinema, and in particular, I like to see people fuck on film."
Yes.
I love the way he delivers that. It's so funny.
It is very funny.
There's another scene here where Philip Seymour Hoffman gets really excited and runs over to Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
And wants to show him his new car.
Yeah. Oh, man. Scotty J.
Scotty.
You deserve the world, man.
Scotty.
Yeah, he's wearing this leather jacket. You get the impression that he's trying to look really cool for Dirk.
Yeah, he's got his money now, and
and he goes to show Dirk his car. We've seen that Dirk has bought an orange Corvette, and Scotty, it's not a Corvette, but he has bought the closest approximation that he can afford, and he just had it painted orange. He's like, yeah, I just got it back from the shop when it was painted. He's like, the paint still might be a little sticky, which is, it's so sweet and so cute. He's also very drunk here.
Yes.
And he just plants one on Dirk. He just gives him a big smooch. And Dirk, to his credit, he doesn't react in a homophobic way.
Yes.
He reacts basically being like, "What are you doing, man?" Because he just didn't expect it.
He's definitely angry and confused, as I'm sure anyone would be.
Yes.
With an unprompted, unsolicited kiss.
Right, from someone who you don't have romantic feelings about. But he's never homophobic about it. He's surprised and a little upset and disconcerted by it, but it's never like a thing where he doesn't even make any comments about the homoeroticism of it. He's basically just like, no, man, let's just go inside. Like, let's go have fun at the party is kind of what he lands on.
Yeah, and Philip Seymour Hoffman confesses that he loves him and delivers this very heartfelt confession, and they hug.
Yeah, and
then Mark's like, let's just go back inside, and he leaves.
There's a really sad moment when they're hugging, and Philip Seymour Hoffman says, I really love you, Eddie, and Dirk responds, I love you too. And Philip Seymour Hoffman just goes, yeah, okay, because he knows that the I love you too is not the type of I love you too that he needed.
Yeah.
It's really sad. Yeah, and then he gets into his car, and the camera holds on him for quite a while. It's probably like close to a minute, and he just keeps going, I'm a fucking idiot. I'm a fucking idiot. I'm a fucking idiot. And it's like, on the one hand, it is a little funny, the I'm a fucking idiot, but it's so heartbreaking and sad. It's, man.
Yeah, I've been there, man.
Yeah.
I know how it feels.
Oof.
Scotty, if you're out there, I know how it feels, man.
Hang in there, man. Oh, God. Yeah.
But then we get to the big countdown.
Yeah.
To New Year's Day. And little Bill is wandering around the party.
Anybody seen my wife?
Yep. I don't know, Bill. What do you think she's up to?
And so little Bill is looking for his wife. He goes down the hall into opens the door to one of the bedrooms. You don't see inside the bedroom this time because you've already seen this happen a couple times in the movie, and you know what's happening.
Exactly.
He opens the door, you just hear like bed springs creaking and moaning sounds, and he just shuts the door. He doesn't say a goddamn thing. And then he walks. There's really excellent tracking shot on William H. Macy in this portion. He walks out to his car. You see him kind of reach over into the glove box, grab something, and he gets out of the car. You can see it's a gun. And then the camera tracks him going into the house again, going down the hall to the bedroom, and bang, 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 takes out his wife and the guy she was fucking. And then he walks back down the hall. The gunshots get the attention of the other people at the party. So they all kind of turn and look as he's coming out of the hallway. And he has kind of a pained smile, sort of a little bemused grimace crosses his face, and he sticks that gun in his mouth, and he blows his fucking brains out. Bam, title card 80s.
Justus, I'm going to make an assertion and then slightly backpedal from it.
Yes.
But I want you to focus on the assertion part,
Yes.
the assertion that I'm about to make. This is the best movie suicide ever. I'm going to backpedal it by saying I can't think of many movie suicides as memorable as this,
Yeah.
as explicit as this, and as tragic and also funny as this.
Yeah. I think I might be with you on this.
If it's not the best, it's at least one of the best.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely it's got to be in the top 5 at least.
I haven't seen Brian Cox jump into a tub rigged up with 30 microwaves.
Which, by the way, I did. We mentioned Brian Cox hilariously killing himself in the ring on our Rango episode. I did, as I was listening back, I was like, I should watch that clip. He doesn't bite the cable, like I said. What he actually does is put a horse bridle into his mouth, because horses are a theme of that movie. He puts a horse bridle into his mouth, and then he has a power strip like on his chest, and he flips the switch. That's how he does it. He doesn't chomp down on a cable, but it is still equally as awesome. That being said, I think Little Bill blowing his brains out even tops Brian Cox lighting himself up in that tub in the ring for me. It's so pitch perfect. It is the one of the best tonal shifts that a movie that I have seen has ever taken. Right? Because up until this point, a few dark things have happened, but by and large, we're partying and having a good time for the first half of Boogie Nights. And then William H. Macy sticks that barrel in his mouth, and his brains go splatter all over that wall. And immediately you're like, oh, I'm in a different movie now.
Right. And I think what makes it so affecting, obviously this is a very serious thing, and suicides on film can be very triggering to people. There are certain suicide scenes that are difficult for me to watch. Mm-hmm. This straddles that line between being disturbing and funny, also not excessive, because so many like gunshot suicides don't show it. They imply it by cutting away and you hear the gunshot, or they cut away and you see the blood spraying against the wall. This is William H. Macy sticking a gun in his mouth, pulling the trigger, and lighting himself up like Bud Dwyer. And you see it all in one. And I think there was a reaction during one of the screenings that PTA attended, where some girls in the front row or whatever applauded when he went and shot his wife and the guy she was fucking.
Oh, weird.
And PTA was like, that's not what I wanted.
No.
And then when he shot himself, they were dead silent. And
Hell
he's
yeah.
like, yep, that's what I wanted.
Which, by the way, I just said hell yeah. I will say, I mentioned the Podmaster was watching this movie with me last night. When this moment happened, when William H. Macy stuck the gun in his mouth and his brains hit the wall, the Podmaster went, hell yeah!
Did you clap and say good movie?
No, but she did say hell yeah. Which I think is her equivalent.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Which I just thought was a very funny reaction.
Yeah. An amazing tonal shift, an amazing scene.
It rips.
I think it was one of two scenes that I had seen before the first time I watched this movie. Was this, or at least was aware of this, and then Mark Wahlberg's dick at the end. Mm-hmm. And watching it for the first time and for this record totally blew me away.
Yeah.
Blew me away much like a 357 shell
with
out the back of William H. Macy's skull.
Yeah, man. Oh God, it rocks so hard. Anyway, and then we're in the 80s. This is our transition point to the 80s.
We've had the rise, and now we're going to have the fall.
Yeah.
If I may adjust that slightly, I think we've had the party, and now we're gonna have the hangover.
I, for a second, thought you were going to say we had the erection, and now it's going to become flaccid.
That would have been funny.
Well, don't worry. I jumped in there. Yeah.
Because I don't think it's quite a fall so much as it is like the reality of this industry and the world that they're in.
Life catches up with these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're in the 80s now.
Yep.
And we start with an interview clip where Dirk Diggler is being interviewed by Amber about the violence in the Brock Landers movies kind of increasing.
Right. And how maybe it's getting a little bit of criticism, like the Johnny Wad stuff was, for being a little bit misogynistic. Yeah. And he's basically, first of all, we see in this interview clip, he is so coked out now. We've jumped forward, right? So the New Year's party was the first time he did coke. Clearly he has a massive coke habit now.
And it's also fueling his ego.
Yes. And great coked out acting by Wahlberg here. You don't have to see him do coke again between the party and this to know that this guy is fucking blasted on cocaine. Like he is a mile a minute in these video clips, and he's kind of tripping over his words and shit. It's just, he looks sweaty too, and I think even his pupils are dilated. And it's very clear cinematic language of like, this guy has a huge drug problem now.
Yeah, and we're about to run into the next big problem of the porn industry at this time. So Amber and Dirk are watching the movie at Jack's house, and Jack gets a call from the Colonel and goes to visit the Colonel in prison.
Yeah.
A 15-year-old girl has overdosed and died.
Mm-hmm. At the Colonel's house.
And the Colonel says that he didn't do anything with her.
Yeah,
and Jack seems to believe him and wants to be like, we're going to get you out of this.
I think, and we'll talk about the rest of the scene, but I think Jack needs to believe him.
Yes.
Continue. Yeah, but yeah.
But the Colonel kind of hesitantly and nervously reveals that they found child pornography at his house.
Yes, and the way that it is scripted is so perfect because they never say that. What the Colonel says is basically like, there was other stuff, and then he sort of breaks down with a little bit of shame here. Like, he can't say it. He can't say the thing.
Yeah.
Right? But what he says is like, they're just so cute and so adorable, and it's my weakness, right? And just in that one line, you as the viewer are like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. It's horrifying and also a very realistic and a seemingly realistic and human portrayal of an absolute monster.
Yes.
And the way that they view their horrible fetishes.
Yes. This scene is bone chilling and phenomenal acting by both of the actors in this scene. The Colonel is like, that performance in this scene is so good because it is a realistically human depiction of a fucking monster, right? And like him trying to basically downplay it and excuse it a little bit, right? And then also just Jack having to reckon with this revelation that his friend and financier, he's basically the guy who has been writing the paychecks or the checks for his movies, right, is a child predator, right? And when I said before that I think Jack needs to believe him at first, right? Before the child porn thing is dropped, right? When he just thinks like, oh, it was a 15-year-old girl that overdosed at your house, but you didn't do anything to her, right? He like needs to believe that and I think Burt Reynolds plays this scene immaculately. I think this is such a good performance because this is not textually like in the dialogue. It's kind of just implied through the performance, right? That this is the moment where Jack is confronted with the dark reality of his own life, right? And we talked before about how Eddie is 17 when Jack offers him a role in an adult film.
Yeah.
Right? He's a child predator too. He is grooming these kids for sex on camera, right? Is what's happening, right? And he doesn't think of himself that way. And I think by being confronted with a more evil and aberrant version of the same behavior by this person he was close to, it forces him to think about his own actions.
Yeah, I think that's a great interpretation because I honestly didn't even consider it when watching this scene. Obviously, I knew, like, of course, you know, Eddie's 17 at the beginning of the movie, but I think a great example of what you just said, they're in that, there's the glass between them in the prison and they're talking on the phones. And at that point, Burt Reynolds hangs up.
Yeah.
And the colonel's just kind of desperately trying to talk to him through the glass.
Yes,
and I think what it is, and Burt Reynolds just gets up and walks away. And maybe it is like he can't hear the colonel justify it because he's scared that it will make sense to him, and then Jack can justify his own actions.
Right, and a thing that we've seen Jack do is he's really good at spinning stuff.
Yes.
He's a spin master, right? He's really good at convincing people to do stuff. He's a porn director, right? And yeah, I think you're totally spot on with that. He is afraid that he can convince himself to look past this, and so he has to walk away from this relationship. And there is the moment that you were just talking about where the colonel's talking through the glass and Jack can't hear him. The last thing the colonel says before the phone cuts out, before Jack hangs up on him, is are we friends, Jack? Right? And then that's what you can see you can read his lips through the glass. He just keeps repeating it. He's like, are you my friend, Jack? Are you my friend, Jack? Right? And Burt Reynolds, just wordless performance here where you just see so much pain and guilt and shame sink in here as he's turning his back on this guy who was a friend of his, because he can't allow this reality to exist in his world. It implicates himself too much, right? And I think this is a turning point for Burt Reynolds' character, I think, because what happens through the rest of the movie, we'll obviously touch on it when we get to the scenes, but I just kind of want to talk meta about his arc in the second half here, is he then sort of loses his passion for the industry for a little bit, right? And we see him basically just start shooting stuff on videotape that he doesn't give a fuck about just to make money, right? He's like, this is how I make a living. We're just gonna shoot some people having sex, whatever.
Right. He fully goes along with Philip Baker Hall's new business idea.
Yes.
Of just shooting on videotape.
Yes, and also I think the cap on this arc that starts with him here in this scene with the colonel is when Dirk does his prodigal son return back to Jack's house at the end after his whole drug arc has come to an end. Dirk apologizes to Jack for being an asshole in a scene that we're about to get to, and walking out on him, and Jack says, "I'm sorry too." And I think the "I'm sorry too" from him is, I'm sorry that I got you into this business in the first place. I am sorry that I, Jack Horner, brought you, Eddie Adams, innocent, wide-eyed kid, into this horrible, dark world, right? And I don't think he recognizes it as horrible and dark until this moment with the colonel. And I think that's what that apology to Eddie is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great stuff. It's 1983. We're jumping ahead in time a lot at this portion of the film. Mark's doing tons of coke. Dirk Diggler loves that nose candy.
Oh yeah. He's just so many rails.
Thomas Jane, who was introduced earlier at the New Year's party, his character's name is Todd, with just the biggest porn stash known to man. He's buddies with Dirk, and it seems like they have a pretty solid coke habit going for him at this point.
Yes. Yeah. By the way, Thomas Jane, we've been calling out some really every performance in this movie is excellent. I think there's no weak performances in this movie.
Yeah.
I did want to call out Thomas Jane is not in this movie very much. He's like incendiary in this movie. He's like a lightning in a bottle to me, especially in the Molina scene, which we'll get to later. I think he is an underrated MVP of this movie because anytime he's present, he sort of brings the darkness into this movie a little bit at the New Year's Eve party, and he doesn't say or do anything scary or weird. It's just how he carries himself. This guy has like an edge to him that is very much contrasting against the kind of wide-eyed innocence of Wahlberg and the goofy good time guy John C. Reilly.
Yeah, I don't know if we really know much about what his profession is or what he does.
He's a male stripper.
Oh, he is?
Yeah. They say
Okay.
that he dances at a club. He's basically like a Magic Mike type male stripper.
Okay, because he kind of just portrays himself as like just another lowlife, kind of rubbing shoulders with the degenerates.
Yeah. And so he's kind of still working in the sex industry, just kind of in a different realm of it. Yeah.
But I think he's definitely encouraging some of Dirk Diggler's darker tendencies.
Yeah. He's a guy who's he's the guy at the party who turns the vibe weird. You know, he's like the guy who shows up and it's like, we're all having fun, we're drinking. And then this is the guy who's like, hey, I have some psilocybin. You know, he's the guy who is like, do you guys want to like take mushrooms and then like watch snuff films? Right. And you're like, where is this coming from? Is sort of his vibe.
I would push back. I think the guy who changes the vibe at the party is Little Bill, actually.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Anyway.
We get to another scene of Mark hyping himself up in the bathroom before a scene, and he is sweaty and coked out of his mind and can't get his dick hard.
Yep. He's having performance issues.
And Mark bursts out of the room. He wants to shoot the scene right now.
Yeah.
But
he's being such a diva here.
Yeah. Super just... You mentioned that you hate characters that are actors.
Yes.
I see what you mean.
Yes. This is very much Dirk here is being the type of actor who in a movie I'm just like, fuck this person.
Yeah.
Because he's like, it's all about me. I'm ready to perform. Everybody has to bend to my whims because I am the star.
And there's this new young hotshot male actor on set named Johnny Doe that earlier we were introduced to, and there was clearly some tension between Dirk and Jack with this new guy on the scene here. Mm-hmm. So Dirk starts doing something that he'll do several times throughout this portion of the film, which is just threaten to fight people with karate.
It's very funny.
I'm pretty sure Mark Wahlberg just does this in his personal life anyway.
Yeah, especially to Vietnamese people. Anyway, but yeah, there's also a great line. He's basically having his diva freak out here, and Jack's basically like, go inside, cool off, and he's like, no, I want to shoot now. And there's a funny line. I really like the Wahlberg delivery here, where he's like, I want to fuck. It's my big dick. Yeah, and they basically have their blowout fight here, and Jack fires him. Right? Yeah. He says, you're fired. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. And Dirk storms off.
And John C. Reilly follows him. So Reed, which is John C. Reilly's character. I know we've said the name, but we've mostly been calling him John C. Reilly. Reed follows him and is like, I'll get him to cool off. And basically Reed just follows him, continues following him.
Yeah.
Right? He just kind of joins up with Dirk and leaves Jack and the crew behind as well.
Yeah, the next big moment is Dirk's in a music studio trying to record some just like really really shitty, like, Foreigner, Journey, arena pop rock.
It's so bad.
And he sounds like shit.
It's so bad. Which is funny because Mark Wahlberg was a musician before he was an actor, right? He was part of a pop group. So he actually can sing better than this. And I just love that it's Mark Wahlberg singing like dog shit on purpose.
Yeah.
It's very funny and good.
Reed is like really into it. Like,
Yeah.
he thinks it sounds great.
Yes, and also Reed clearly is also very, very heavy into the drugs as well.
Yes.
And so they're basically doing that cokehead, they're doing cokehead improv, right? Where they're just yes-anding each other. Right? Basically being like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's do this. Oh yeah, I love that idea. Let's do it more. Right? And they're just making the music essentially worse and worse and worse because they're coke improving it.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Jack is shooting on video now.
Yep.
With Philip Baker Hall and doing these new action movies with Johnny Doe in the role. I like that his character's name is Rock Harders. just the most obvious terrible porn name ever, because like, and I think it's kind of another sign of the decline in quality of
Like they're not even trying it.
They're not even trying, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I think Brock Landers and Chest Rockwell are ridiculous names, but kind of cool and
Yes.
not at all obvious porn. Not exactly obvious porn names.
It has that camp charm to it.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Rock Harders is just like, you're like, okay, that is gross and lazy.
Yeah.
And we get a little bit of the shots of his movies, and they are like more misogynistic, more kind of violent, leaning into like male domination of women type fantasies, which also kind of indicates to the viewer that, yeah, things are taking a less pleasant turn all around, right?
There's a great little Coke montage. It's the Coke montage of Thomas Jane, Mark Wahlberg, John C. Reilly, and Philip Seymour Hoffman storing Coke because Scotty J is kind of involved with their they're all friends now. And
Yes.
they're going on this strange adventure together.
Yeah, we get the impression that Scotty J doesn't really like what's happening. Like, Scotty J is kind of opposed to the very, very heavy drug use.
Yeah.
But he's sticking around because he's holding that candle for Dirk. He's still in love with him, and he's not going to just abandon him. So
There's a sequence here where Buck, Don Cheadle, he's now married to another actress, and he's trying to start up his own stereo store, and he's at the bank trying to get the bank loan.
yeah, I think the one that he's married to is the one that he met at the party who I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
But the bank won't give him a loan because he's associated with porn, but he really wants to go into the stereo business.
Yeah.
I think one of the big flaws for this movie personally is its depiction of characters of color in this movie, because they're there and the movie just forgets about them and pushes them to the side. There's a black actor and a black actress in this movie that are just kind of completely background characters in this movie as well that we haven't mentioned at all.
Yeah.
Because they have kind of a little bit of an arc that the movie has just playing in the background. Luis Guzman, who's introduced in the first scene, has almost nothing to do in this movie.
Yeah.
And I wish that either more had been done with those characters, especially when they are cast with such great actors in their roles.
I completely agree. And there's, to your point, we haven't even mentioned at all Becky Barnett, who is the black porn actress who you alluded to,
Yeah.
right? She's like a decent sized role in this movie. Like she does pop up multiple times. Like we saw her in some of the earlier scenes in the first half when we're in the good times. Like she's at the parties, she's on the set of the porn shoots and stuff. And even here we see her like get married, I think. And there's a couple more moments with Becky. But to your point, talking through the plot of the movie and talking through kind of the big important set pieces here, we've completely missed her, because you're right, the movie sort of forgets she's in it, right? And it's like, yeah, she's around, but it doesn't give her anything really to do. And the Becky Barnett character specifically, because like Don Cheadle is like a legitimately like three-dimensional supporting character in this movie, right? He's maybe not given as much focus as I think he deserves, right? But it's like you can track Don Cheadle through this movie. I think with the Becky Barnett character, it is a thing where it's like you have one kind of major supporting black woman in this movie, and she's just given the least to do out of anybody. And that is, I agree with you. I think if this movie has a weakness, I think that is definitely it.
Yeah, and I think it's part of some of my issues with the second half of the film that we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to some of the bigger sequences.
Yeah.
There's another scene here where Amber and Roller Girl are doing coke, and Roller Girl wants to get her GED. Amber misses Dirk, and they have a moment, and Roller Girl asks Amber to be her mom.
I love this scene.
Yeah, I think this is a great scene.
There were a few scenes that really, really stuck out to me as like major highlights of not just this movie, but just some of my favorite scenes in movies, right? And in this movie, there's a few of those. One is the Molina scene, which we'll get to. One is William H. Macy blowing his brains out at the New Year's Eve party. Really just that whole New Year's Eve party sequence, culminating in that moment. Another one is the prison scene with the Colonel and Jack that we just talked about. This is the other one, the Roller Girl and Amber, because they are so coked out, and the way that the camera is like really close in each of their faces, because they're very close to each other, like just talking in a super coked out way, to each other about like you're so amazing, you can do anything.
It's very like two drunk girls like, you're my best friend, I love you so much.
Yes, and just the manic energy of this, and I really, really love the performances here from Heather Graham and Julianne Moore. They're just acting their asses off in this scene. It's a pretty short scene, and it's intercut with some other stuff, but there is so much pain and desperation just bubbling barely under the surface of these two characters, and they're just like barely concealing how on the brink of just total emotional collapse they both are, right? And they're just trying to essentially like hold each other up here. And I just love how frenetic and unstable it feels. It's really fun and good.
Yeah, and it definitely hits a lot harder when a little bit later in this montage, Amber loses a custody hearing.
Yeah.
With her husband over custody of their child. She loses visitation rights because of her associations with the porn industry and her drug addiction.
Yeah, and in the scene with Don Cheadle in this montage that we also already alluded to, he's denied a loan at the bank to start his stereo business for the same reason. And I think that is a thing that works for me in the third act of this movie. Is like I said before, I like this movie kind of walking the tightrope between sort of allowing you to feel excited and positive about these people working in the porn industry, and also acknowledging the very real hazards of that industry, right? But I also love how there's the additional dimension of, you do get in this third act some of the reaction from society to these people.
Yeah.
And the movie frames it as tragic that society is treating them this way, right? On the one hand, it's like, Amber does have a drug problem. Should she actually have custody of her kid? Maybe not, right? She is irresponsible, right? But at the same time, you know her and like her at that point, and it's crushing when that happens to her. And on the more black and white side, right? Like the more like it you feel more specifically bad about it. Don Cheadle being denied the loan for being a pornographer. It's like he is trying to go legit. He's trying to live the life that he actually wants, right? And it's like society is barring him from doing that because he has been involved in the production of pornography. And I think that the movie is taking the stance that's like, yeah, maybe just complete carte blanche to have full sexual liberation and have a 15-year-old OD at your house and get a 17-year-old into porn acting. Maybe that's not good. But equally not good is this moralistic, puritanical stance that these institutions take that prevents these people from living normal lives, right? So I just like that that's kind of a thing that the movie throws in here.
Yeah, I like it in this montage sequence. What we're about to get to are three kind of big scenes. They're all intercut back and forth that I don't like. That I don't think I like.
Yeah.
So these are we're kind of building towards the climax of the film. And we have three things going on. The first is Dirk gets picked up by a guy.
Yeah.
He's out cruising.
Yes.
Shall we say.
For coke money, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy asks him to jerk off. But I'm not gay, I swear, which I thought was funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's being really aggressive to him, and then guys in a truck show up, drag Mark Wahlberg out of the car, start beating him up, calling him homophobic slurs and stuff. And it's clear that like this guy was setting him up,
yes,
to get jumped by these guys.
Yes, it's a premeditated hate crime.
Yeah, basically.
Yep.
Something that Mark Wahlberg is very familiar with.
Premeditated hate crimes. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Not being on the receiving end. That was probably new to him.
Every time I think we're gonna stop talking about Mark Wahlberg committing hate crime, we bring it up one more time.
You can't talk about Mark Wahlberg without talking about the fact that the man has perpetrated hate crimes. I'm sorry. Anyway.
There's another scene here of Burt Reynolds and Roller Girl in a limousine, just trying to pick up a guy off a street to shoot a porno movie.
Yeah, they're doing the bang bus.
Yeah. And they pick up a guy who kind of starts getting rough with her.
Yeah.
And recognizes her from high school.
Yes, which she does not like.
Yeah.
She's very, very uncomfortable as soon as she realizes that this guy knows who she is in real life.
They kick him out. Burt starts kicking the shit out of him.
Yeah, because and the thing that sets Burt off is the guy says to Burt, because he's been insulting Roller Girl, and Burt's been kind of getting pissed off about that.
Right.
But then he turns to him and says, "And your movies suck now anyway," right? And that's what sets Jack off, and he starts giving this kid the beat down, this frat kid.
And then Roller Girl starts kicking him in the head with her roller skates on.
Imagine getting fucking curb stomped by roller skates. Holy shit. Is this guy dead? I think he might be dead.
He might be dead.
Because, like, when they drive away, he's kind of, like, twitching on the sidewalk. I'm like, this guy is probably deceased. Heather Graham may have murdered this man. Which, to be fair, he was being a fucking asshole.
And our last scene of this sequence is Don Cheadle and his wife, who is now pregnant. They show up to a donut shop, and Don Cheadle goes in to buy some donuts, and a robber busts in with a revolver, starts demanding money. We see a redneck reading a hunting magazine.
Yes.
Which is a good sign.
Yep.
This guy has an NRA membership, and he is ready to be the good guy with a gun.
Yeah, which I love. Don Cheadle sees this guy reaching for the gun, and he literally is like, "Don't do that."
The redneck shoots the robber. The redneck also gets shot by the robber at the same time. They shoot each other at the same time.
Yeah.
As he gets hit, the redneck's gun goes off and kills the donut shop cashier.
Yeah.
And Don Cheadle's just standing there, paralyzed, with blood all over his white suit.
He's got like skull fragments and like brain matter on him too.
Yeah.
It's like because the cashier gets their fucking dome exploded like right in front of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he spies the bag of stolen money.
Yep.
On the ground and takes off with it.
Yeah. He has a very brief moment where he's like, "Is this too low for me?" And then he's like, "No, I'm taking the money.
Yeah.
The bank won't give me the money. I'm taking the fucking money." Which in this scene, both times I've watched it, it's interesting how for me as a viewer, my gut reaction when the shootout happens and he's looking at that money is like, please take the money, because you want him to open his stereo store so bad. Like,
Yeah.
you want him to have the life that he wants and deserves, right? And I'm like, just take the fucking money, right? And of course he does, but it's like, I just feel so I feel so strongly about that moment where I'm like, I need this for him, you know? Yeah. Also, just very silly brief sidebar here. I do like when Don Cheadle enters the donut shop and he's like picking out the donuts before the robber comes in. One of them, this is set at Christmas time.
Oh yeah.
And in the case, there's like a holiday, like a Christmas donut, and he says to the donut shop cashier, he's like, "Did you do these for the Christmas?" which I love. Including an unnecessary "the" before something. Like, "the Christmas" is so funny to me. And Don Cheadle, like, we haven't talked enough about his performance, but fucking spectacular. He's so charming. He's so great in this movie. I love it.
Yeah. So I like these scenes in isolation. However, they don't work for me in the greater context of the film and where they appear. Because I think the movie's giving them a lot of dramatic weight. And they are dramatic scenes, but it seems like this half of the movie is darker. Mm-hmm. And I wish that we had spent some more time on the darker side of the porn industry. Rather than this feels like all of these external things that are happening to these characters, and they just sort of happen out of nowhere. The porn industry has a very checkered past.
Yeah.
And especially during the 70s and 80s. We allude to it a little bit with The Colonel. I wish maybe it had given us a little bit more of those harsh realities rather than just these kind of unrelated external things happening to these people.
That's fair. I didn't have that feeling about it when I watched this movie either time, but hearing your rationale there, I get this critique of this portion. I didn't feel that way about it, but I don't disagree with what you're saying. It is sort of like a Diabolus ex machina, right? Where it's basically just like, instead of there being these challenging and upsetting moments for these characters in a way that relates to their journey throughout the rest of the movie. Yeah, you are right. It's basically just like the screenplay just throws tragedy at them that isn't really interwoven with the rest of their story.
And I think they're almost kind of treated as wacky, crazy misadventures.
Right.
And I think the wacky, crazy misadventure that follows this,
yes,
works brilliantly.
Yes.
But I would like a little bit more of a look at the dark side of this industry and give these characters tragedies that feel more realistic to their situations, I guess.
Yeah. So,
You know, just Don Cheadle wandering into a donut shop and just a robbery happening. It feels like I'm in a Coen Brothers movie now.
right.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't-
It is very Fargo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have a problem with it, but I agree with you. It didn't take me out of the movie, or I didn't have that as like a fault against it, but I think you're correct. I think you're right. I did want to just, because I know we're wrapping up talking about these three scenes, I did want to call out, just again, phenomenal filmmaking by PTA here, where when these three scenes are, I think it's when the donut shop scene starts. So the roller girl scene and the Dirk scene have been being intercut between each other. Both of those scenes wrap up, and what the camera does to transition to the donut shop scene is just really incredible, because it's basically just a shot of a busy street in LA, and the two hate crime trucks take a turn onto this road. So you see those trucks kind of drive out of the scene with Dirk and onto this road, and then they are going one direction, and in the other direction, then Jack's limo that he's in with Roller Girl comes down the street in the other direction, and then as your eyes are kind of watching that as the viewer, from the other direction, Don Cheadle's car with his wife then drives into frame on this same static shot of the road, and then the camera follows his car into the donut shop parking lot. Just a really skillful and dynamic piece of filmmaking.
Now that you mention that, I remember that sequence.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of something that would belong in his next film, Magnolia. Like it's a little mini warm up for Magnolia, where all of these tragedies are kind of intersecting with each other and affecting these characters in unexpected ways. A little bit. He's kind of starting to do that, and it just feels out of place for me.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And with the movie giving so much dramatic weight, there's no soundtrack here. There's score, and it is a very like minimal synthy heartbeat kind of escalating score underscoring this tension.
Yeah, and there's like a bell tolling in the score. It's basically like doom dong doom dong.
Yeah.
And it's giving you very much like funeral dirge vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really trying to sell you on how serious and dark things are about to get. And
that is, by the way, the first time I watched it, that piece of scoring worked for me. This time, it is one of the only moments in this movie that felt a little ham-handed to me, where I was like, okay, PTA, phenomenal filmmaker, even at 26, was still definitely refining his craft here. Because that is definitely a choice where I'm like, I don't know if a more mature filmmaker would go with that.
Yeah. Let's talk about a surprise Alfred Molina.
Alfred Molina jump scare.
This portion of the film is titled Long Way Down, parentheses, One Last Thing.
Yes.
Dirk and the boys are playing poker, and Thomas Jane comes up with this idea to get some more money, that he's going to cut some coke with baking soda and sell it to this guy, Rahad Jackson, for $5,000.
Yes, this is the guy who's based on the real-life gangster Eddie Nash.
Thomas Jane's really excited about this and really wants to do it, but they're like, what if he tests it out? And
yeah.
Thomas Jane's like, nah, he won't. It'll be fine.
Yeah. And so Thomas Jane talks him into it. Basically by being like, we'll get $5,000. And I love Dirk being like, that's enough to fix the vet. Like the car is still the thing that he just cares the most about because he's a dumb himbo. Anyway, so they go to Rahad Jackson's house in the hills, right? They roll up, and Thomas Jane is basically like, let me do the talking, we'll be in and out. They go up to the door, massive intimidating bodyguard immediately like opens the little peep window and is like, come on in, right? And so then they go in, and the way that this scene is constructed is fucking genius because there is music playing, diegetic music that is playing from Rahad Jackson's stereo system. It's playing so loud. The house is gorgeous and empty, right?
And also kind of a mess.
Yes, it's a gorgeous kind of mansion in the hills. It looks like there has been, you know, the never-ending party bender that Jesse Pinkman goes on in Breaking Bad? Yeah, very much the same vibe, where it's like this place has been partied in so much that the vibes have gone from fun to unhinged, right? And there's a guy just lighting up firecrackers and setting them off. So every once in a while throughout this entire sequence, you just have a firecracker randomly bang in the background, and you sometimes get the light and sometimes you only get the noise. And it's like, it is so uniquely tense and unsettling as a viewer to watch this because you're like, what the fuck is going to happen?
Yeah, and the costuming's great because Alfred Molina is in a bathrobe and underwear.
Yes, bikini underwear, which, by the way, lots of bikini-style brief underwear on men in this movie.
Yeah.
Bikini briefs, a skinny man's underwear. If you're a larger gentleman, you can't get away with those bikini brief-style underwear. That is Chafe City, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
It is a thin man's gambit.
The person lighting off fireworks is named Cosmo.
Yes.
He has no dialogue for the scene.
Yes.
He's wearing a Rick Springfield crop top and like short shorts.
Yes.
And he's Asian and he's just walking around this house barefoot.
Yes.
It just it's a very funny visual on its own. And then he's just nonchalantly lighting fireworks, like little firecrackers, and they just pop off. And he doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care.
And we sort of get the impression that everybody in this house is on so many drugs that there are holes in their brain.
Yeah.
So that's also probably part of what's going on with Cosmo.
Well, and I think you mentioned the never-ending party bender.
Yeah.
I think this is like definitely the after party. Like everyone else has left,
Yes.
and Cosmo's just still here for some reason.
Yes. By the way, just again, brief sidebar on the real life Eddie Nash. This is apparently a thing that the real Eddie Nash, the gangster who this character is based on, would do. He was on so many drugs all the time. He was constantly freebasing cocaine and doing heroin. And he just wanted a party around him always, right? He never wanted the good vibes to die down. And so he would pay people to just come hang out at his house so that there were always people around him who he could talk to and party with, right? And he would like give them free drugs and all kinds of stuff just because he wanted the company, right? But one thing that Molina does in this scene, which is the Russian roulette, which we'll get to, is apparently based on a real thing Eddie Nash would do at parties, where he would just put a gun to his own head and be like, you dare me to do it? You dare me to do it? And just play. He wouldn't play Russian roulette with the guests. He would just make them watch him do it, which is so fucking scary. So yeah, we can go back to the scene. I just wanted to call out the real life inspiration there.
Yeah, and the music, the needle drops in this scene. Sister Christian.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Which Molina lip syncs to and air keyboards to.
Oh, it's such a good this scene has the best needle drops. This one, the Jesse's Girl one, and then at the end the 99 Luftballons one.
Oh God.
Oh, it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thomas Jane shows Alfred Molina the Coke and they start talking about the price. And I love Thomas Jane getting asked about the price, and he just laughs for like a solid 30 seconds. He's like,
yeah,
about $5,000.
Yeah, and when he's laughing, John C. Reilly and Wahlberg are looking at him like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what did we get ourselves into?
And they notice that his bodyguard has a gun on him.
Yep. They only see one gun. Turns out he's got two guns, baby.
Yeah. Molina lights up a pipe and they're just like, we need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Then we have Russian roulette.
Yep. And yeah, he goes and gets the box and is like, I want you to see this, and pulls the gun out. And I think it's Thomas Jane goes, is that silver? which is very funny. And then one of them is like, one of the guys is like, that's not loaded, is it? And then Molina goes, not yet. And yeah, puts a bullet in one of the chambers in the revolver and spins it, puts it under his chin. You dare me? You dare me?
And like,
no, we don't dare
We
you.
don't.
Please don't. Right? It is hard to describe to someone who has not watched this scene how deeply uncomfortable this is. It's just like, you know how there's that thing where sometimes people feel very like they get an aversion to watching things that depict like awkward situations.
Yeah.
Right? Like people will have an aversion to awkwardness. This is that plus just like real life-threatening scary shit. Like it is a true nightmare scenario, right? They're like in hell. It rocks. It's so good.
There's a lot of comparisons I can make with this movie and Damien Chazelle's Babylon.
Yeah.
Which I do like quite a bit. I know people are pretty divided on it. I like it quite a bit. But there is a scene at the end of that movie with a surprise Tobey Maguire. We got Spider-Man and we got Doc Ock. That is basically this. Just this again.
Yeah.
Another very uncomfortable situation with an unpredictable, crazy person played by
a guy who was in Spider-Man 2.
A guy who was in Spider-Man 2. And in that, it is very literally depicted as hell because they go into this sort of underground nightclub and there's different levels.
Oh, okay.
And each level
yeah.
gets subsequently more depraved and absurd.
Gotcha.
And at that point, I was like, I think I'm just watching Boogie Nights again.
Yeah. Just a more on the nose Boogie Nights.
Kind of in a lot of ways, I think that movie is.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy it quite a bit. But
there's a great moment here where the bodyguard takes the Coke to start weighing it out, the Coke cut with baking soda, and they're all really like tense now because the bodyguard has taken the bag and they're like, oh shit, like what if he fucking tests it? Like the jig's up. So and they have been given the money. Like the bodyguard gives them the $5,000.
Yeah.
And so John C. Reilly and Mark Wahlberg are basically like, we have the money, let's just fucking leave. And Thomas Jane is like, no, we're gonna hang out for a little bit longer. There's a great moment here where the music stops.
yes.
So Sister Christian has been playing, the song ends, and the tape automatically starts rewinding because it's like a mixtape that Rahad has made, and it goes very quiet all of a sudden because the music has been blasting, and it's so tense because when the music stops, it's like Rahad, it's like his vibes also stop with the music, and he goes from being like manic but friendly to suddenly being like really vacant. and you're like, oh fuck, like what is this guy gonna do now? And it's just a moment where you're like waiting for something to happen, and then one of those fucking firecrackers goes off and you're like, shit, right? And then Jesse's Girl starts playing and Rahad starts having fun again. It's so scary and good that he's only having a good time when the music's playing. And as soon as it shuts off, it's like, now everything is like the temperature of the room just dropped. Yeah.
Is it bad if I say this is the best scene in the movie?
No, it is. I think it is.
I think it's like this and the New Year's Eve party.
Yeah.
Are my, I mean, there's tons of great scenes in this movie, but this is when I really get like, oh, PTA is doing something here.
I think there's two things in this scene that make it the best scene in the movie for me. One is just this insane performance by Alfred Molina. Hard to overstate how fantastic this performance is. The other thing is the long shot on Dirk's face and it's right around here.
Oh yeah.
It's right around here when Jesse's Girl is playing. Rahad is singing along to Jesse's Girl. He's in party mode again, right? And there is a moment when the camera locks onto Dirk's face, and it's just Mark Wahlberg acting. And I know I said earlier Mark Wahlberg is a bad actor. when he's well directed, he is good. David is right about that.
Yes.
This is the best acting I have ever seen Mark Wahlberg do, and it is really phenomenal. It's really something, because the camera holds on his face for almost a minute, and you just see him wordlessly cycle through a bunch of emotions. You can see the wheels in his head spinning, right? You can watch Dirk Diggler thinking about his life, his choices, everything that has led him here, and make the decision to turn his life around. And he doesn't say any of that, but you can see him basically being like, how the fuck did I get here? I am in hell. This is has gone so far. I am in so far over my head, and I need to get my shit together. And he just does it with his eyes and face. God bless him.
Yeah.
And it rocks. It's so good. And that's why this is the best scene in the movie to me. He's your protagonist. He's the character you've been following for the whole movie. And you see the most important, his climactic moment in his character journey is done with no words. And I'm just like, you can't do that in another medium. That's movies, baby.
That's the movies.
Yeah.
Thomas Jane doesn't want to leave and says that he tells Alfred Molina he wants what's in the floor safe in the bedroom.
Yep.
And pulls a gun on him. And we wound up that tension. It's time to release it.
Yeah. I think so Thomas Jane points his gun at the bodyguard first, because he knows the bodyguard has a gun. And he says, like, don't reach for your guns. And then Molina has the Russian roulette revolver. And yeah, we release that tension. We've been getting a bunch of fake out gunshots with the firecrackers. Now we get real gunshots. Molina shoots Thomas Jane in the shoulder, wings him. Thomas Jane kind of falls to the ground and shoots the bodyguard a bunch of times. The bodyguard pulls out two guns.
Yeah.
And starts guns akimbo, blasting. So I started blasting. Thomas Jane shoots him a bunch of times in the chest. Bodyguard falls over dead. Molina, if you haven't seen this scene, please look it up on YouTube and just watch.
Stop the podcast and watch it.
Please just watch this scene, because there is a moment here in this gunfight when Alfred Molina flees to the bedroom. And he laughs like a little gremlin. He runs away from the gunfight after shooting Thomas Jane. And he does like I don't even know if I can replicate it, but it's like a, yeah. He sounds like a Muppet. It is batshit. And so he has run into the bedroom. Bodyguard's now dead. This is one of my favorite Thomas Jane moments in this movie. Is he gets back up. He's been shot in the shoulder, but like the threat is neutralized for the moment. And he is trying to get Dirk and Reed to help him, right? He's like, come on, like we'll get all the money. This is what we came here to do. And he starts off really confident, but then he's been shot in the shoulder, so he kind of peters out towards the end of this like inspirational coke-fueled speech,
right?
Where he's like, this is what we fucking came here to do, man. We're gonna do it. And then he like takes off for the bedroom and just like knocks over a lamp on his way.
And then he kicks open the door to the bedroom and just gets blasted in the chest with a shotgun.
He just gets blown the fuck away.
Dr. Octopus has a shotgun now.
It's so good. It's so good.
And Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly are like, let's get the fuck out of here.
Yes.
They book it.
Yes.
Out of the front door of this like Hollywood Hills mansion, down to the street where Mark's shitty Corvette, his smashed up Corvette, is parked.
Yeah.
And Alfred Molina is wildly firing at them as they flee.
He's shooting at them with the shotgun. He keeps calling them puppies. He's like, I'll get you puppies. Yeah. And so then they get in the Corvette. It won't start at first. So they're kind of just pushing it away initially. And John C. Reilly actually doesn't end up getting in the car.
Yeah, he just runs down a side street.
Yeah,
or something.
Dirk finally gets the car to start and just pedal to the metal floors it. Reed's not in the car, and Reed, just runs away. and then the car runs out of gas, and we get this very funny little like end point. The cherry on top of this scene is basically car runs out of gas, and we cut to Dirk, like basically the sun is rising, it's morning now after this like night from hell, and he's just walking his Corvette in neutral because it's he can't even afford to fill the tank.
Yeah. And we reach basically the final scene here where Mark Wahlberg shows up to Burt Reynolds' house and walks in, breaks down and says and apologizes and asks for help.
Yeah. Yep. And this is the moment that I alluded to earlier where Jack and Dirk hug, and Dirk says, "I'm sorry," and Jack says, "I'm sorry too." And from there, we go into a little good time montage.
Yeah.
All of our characters get their little happy... Well, not all of our characters, because we do see the Colonel.
Yeah, so it's set to God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. Another really solid Neil drop in this movie.
Yeah, good one.
So I'll just speed through these so we can get out of here. We see Buck is now making a commercial for his new stereo store. Philip Seymour Hoffman is there. Amber's directing it.
Yeah.
And Don Cheadle's wife now has a kid. Roller Girl is back in school, presumably taking her GAD or just taking a test or something. Colonel gets his shit rocked in prison.
His cellmate is beating the ever-loving shit out of him.
John C. Reilly's doing a magic show.
Yes.
Because he's a magician. They allude to that throughout the movie.
And it's kind of implied with his character that the porn thing is something he has found himself in, but his real passion is magic.
But
that's what he wants to be doing.
Yeah, he's also playing up the porn angle in his show because there's a nude woman on stage.
Yeah, he's got a topless assistant or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what the gag is, but that's
he makes her appear out of a box. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And it's the magical appearing naked lady.
Yes. I'd see that magic show.
Yeah.
I'd buy that for $1.
Luis Guzman opens a new club and the sign is misspelled.
That was kind of the joke that I thought was least funny in this movie.
Yeah.
The Rodriguez brothers nightclub, and it's a Q instead of a G.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of like holding their heads and being like, "Oh no, they messed up the sign." And I was like,
it's just a kind of an afterthought with his character. Just feels like an afterthought in this movie.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, especially because Luis Guzman, great actor, great performance in this movie. Yeah, he should have been given more to do.
There's another gag earlier where he's like trying to talk to Jack about wanting to be in a movie.
Yeah,
and it's implied that he wants to be like.
He wants to fuck sexy ladies.
He wants to fuck someone on camera. Yeah. And he shows up in a Brock Landers movie as like the bartender.
Yeah, as like
that's all his character really has. He's just kind of played for jokes and
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But now everyone is back at Jack's house, and this is when it's like, oh, this is about a family.
Yeah.
You get the vibe that everyone's back together. We're a family again. We have Don Cheadle playing with his new son in the pool. We have a wonder of as we follow Jack walking through his house, and there's all these little scenes where they're getting ready to shoot another scene, but they're just kind of hanging out beforehand. We see a shitty painting of William H. Macy.
Yes.
Presumably painted by the same person who painted Dirk's terrible painting.
Little Bill's final indignity. By the way, I think the person painting the paintings, is the lady that Don Cheadle gets married to.
Okay.
I think she is the painter.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yes. Yeah, Little Bill's last indignity.
I see it. It's funny that it's a bad painting.
Yes.
But it is a nice nod to Little Bill, and I think they do miss him. I think they did love him.
Yes, it is a little strange to have a tribute painting hanging in your house of a guy who did a double murder suicide in that house. I'm not sure I would be like, oh yeah, that guy who murdered two of our friends and then blew his own brains out.
Yeah,
great guy.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's a movie.
There's lots of little things that we probably could talk about here, but I think there's just one big thing that we do need to talk about before we close the show.
One 13-inch thing.
Dirk Diggler's rehearsing his lines, getting warmed up for his next scene, hyping himself up, smoking a cigarette, totally cool and confident.
And there is kind of a nice thing here where his mirror acting, right? Because he's, practicing his lines and acting to the mirror. His mirror acting has gotten better.
Yeah.
Because he's been through the ringer. He's lived some real shit and is a better performer as a result of it, which is kind of a cool thing.
And he does something that I think in previous scenes has been alluded to, but not actually shown as part of his warm-up routine. He takes out his Wahlberg. He says, I'm a star, I'm a star, I'm a star, I'm a big, bright, shining star. Zips up his pants, does his karate moves. That's right. Doors open, and the movie's over.
Yeah.
Justus, we got to talk about this penis.
We must talk about it demands to be addressed. It's prosthetic penis. It's not Mark Wahlberg's actual penis. Presumably, number one, because maybe he wasn't comfortable showing his real cock on camera. And number two, because maybe Mark Wahlberg doesn't actually have a 13-inch hog. And it has to be insanely large. Because the point of the movie is that this guy has such an enormous cock that nobody is able to ignore the potential of a member of that size, right? So it's like, I love the movie's choice to show it. I'm glad it shows it.
Yeah.
And it had to be fucking massive. And it is. It's a big old dong. And it's flaccid, but whoo boy is that thing. It's almost down to his goddamn knees.
I'm thinking about the poor makeup artist who, one, had to presumably create a prosthetic mold.
Yes.
For this cock, and then had to apply that prosthetic to Mark Wahlberg's nether regions. And I hope that makeup artist, that special effects artist, was paid very well for their work.
Yeah.
For having to see Mark Wahlberg's actual penis in the application of this thing.
I don't know if
possibly.
Depending on how it was applied, because he might have had like a little thong or dance belt or something on under there, and it might have been applied over some kind of clothing. It's hard to tell because it looks pretty good, but you can't really see the seams here.
You're looking at that cock. I was looking at that cock for a while.
It holds on it.
It's a good looking cock.
It's quite real looking.
Yeah.
Yes, and also one of the things that the girlfriend, the high school girlfriend, really, really early in the movie says to Dirk is, "You have a beautiful cock." And so again, when they show it, not only does it have to be extremely large, but it also just has to be a quite aesthetically pleasing John Thomas, if you will. And it is. Looks good. Good looking dick.
And a great way to close this film.
Yeah.
Justus, let us not spend any more time on Mark Wahlberg's penis. Let's get to the real meat of the podcast.
Hey-yo.
Hey. Justus is Boogie Nights, the greatest movie ever made.
David, is Boogie Nights from 1997 the greatest movie ever made is the question that you are asking me, and my answer to that is yes, it is. Boogie Nights is the greatest movie ever made. And we did talk about, in our first episode on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, when we were explaining the thesis of this podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is this the first good movie we've talked about?
Well, I don't think it's the first good movie. I think there's lots of good. It's maybe one of the first universally critically acclaimed movies that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And David and I did mention on the first episode that we are going to talk about all kinds of movies on this podcast. We've sort of already talked about many, many different kinds of movies on this podcast. But we're not going to, this isn't just a bad movie podcast, if you will, or like a trash movie, like a junk movie podcast, if you will. It is we're going to try and cover all kinds of movies from all eras, all genres, and all kind of levels of commercial and critical success, right? This is the first movie that we're covering on this podcast, that I think is pretty universally critically beloved. This is a movie where if you say Boogie Nights is the greatest movie ever made, in my opinion, as opposed to something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 or Rango or Lady Hawk, you're not, or Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight Part 2, you're not going to have people be like, what the fuck, if you say that, right? Like, that is a take that I feel like a lot of people who like movies will be like, yeah, I can see that, right? They might not agree, but they're probably not going to give you a huge amount of pushback on having that opinion. Right. So yeah, this is the first kind of movie that falls into that category that we're talking about. I don't know that every movie that we eventually cover that does fall into that category, I will say is the greatest movie ever made, right? Because some masterpieces, some great works of art land better for some people than others. Art is subjective. For me, this masterpiece hits. It is, like I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, it's just one of the movies that makes me understand and appreciate the medium of film better, right? And I think it's entertaining. I think it's full of great performances. I think the script is really good and very, very funny. There's a line that I didn't mention it when we were talking about the scene, but in the scene where Philip Baker Hall and Burt Reynolds are talking at the New Year's Eve party, and Philip Baker Hall is basically saying, you know, the future's video and the future is amateurs, and he has a line where he's like, it's what people like. He's like, me, I like butter in my ass and lollipops in my mouth. Call me a pervert, but it's what I like. And the script is just full of such fun little off the wall, unhinged lines of dialogue like that, right? Just think it's a great screenplay, great music, great vibes. I want to hang out in this movie. I kind of want to live in this movie, and it lets you live in it for a little bit because at 2 hour 30 plus, there's room to breathe in here, and I think that's nice. I sometimes like a long movie that I can hang out with and chill in, and I think of that ilk, this is one of my faves of all time. David, Boogie Nights is the greatest movie ever made. Now, turning this around on you.
Oh
no! David, is Boogie Nights the greatest movie ever made?
No.
Wow! I'm actually, I didn't know what you were going to say, but I will say, I'm not mad at you this time. I was mad at you about Prince of Darkness. I'm not mad at you this time.
I liked this movie.
Yeah.
I even loved this movie. I think this was great. This played way better for me this time. I had a much better connection to the characters, the world, the vibe, the atmosphere. I think I'm still not quite there. This is a young filmmaker doing something I could never do.
Yeah.
But it is living in the shadow of its influences a little bit for me. And I think there are other films that do this rise and fall story better for me, that I feel more invested in living in for a long time. We'll get to that whenever we inevitably cover Goodfellas.
Yeah.
And I get to gush about that movie for 5 hours. But that's not a knock against that movie. I just think personally for me, those types of films, those other films that this movie is clearly influenced by, that PTA was clearly influenced by, work a little bit better. But there's great performances, there's great characters. I think it does a disservice to some of the side characters in this movie and the characters of color.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I didn't call it out of my final thoughts, but plus one on that, yeah.
And thematically, I think some of the darker turns in the second half are a little out of place for me. But otherwise, I love the tone of this movie. I love how it plays with comedy and tragedy and the glitz and glamour and the realism of the porn industry, or this movie's version of the porn industry. Had a great time with it. Highly recommend it. but I have some issues with it, and I do not think on this viewing that it struck me at all as the greatest movie ever made. But it's a great time, and I highly recommend it. And thanks for suggesting it, so I had the chance to have a second go around with it.
Yeah, that's honestly why I put this movie on our record schedule. Is I was like, I just want to watch Boogie Nights, so we might as well talk about it on the podcast because I just want to rewatch Boogie Nights. Yeah, that's Boogie Nights.
Yeah, we are off next week for Thanksgiving, but we will be returning with Heathers from 1989. Directed by Michael Lehman.
Yeah, baby.
Another one that I've seen only once that I'm very excited to have a second go around with because it played great for me the first time.
Yeah, we are going to have a ball talking about Heathers. What a delightful movie.
Yeah. So we hope that you will join us for that. Have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Hopefully your families are well and they don't cause any drama in your life for the holiday season. Take care. We love you so much. And as always, we leave you with our trademark patented sign-off.
Later, dipshits!